Chapter 8:12. Kuang Xieyue was absolutely unscrupulous. He actually dared to attack Chu Xiu in front of so many big shots of the hidden devil bloodline. Regardless of how other big shots of Yinma branch thought of Chu Xiu belonged to Yinma branch. Even though Kuang Xieyue was an immortal general of Elysium branch, they couldn't let Kuang Xieyue kill Chu Xiu in front of the public. The Crimson Drill Devil sect's Qin Chaoxian spoke coldly as well. Kuang Xieyue, do you really think that your heaven path is the #1 sect in the world? Even if my Yinma clan is not the Kunlun devil cult of the past, we are not people that you can humiliate at will. In an instant, the 4 true fire spirit refinement realm experts of the Yinma clan all looked as if they were ready to fight. Even Dong Huangtai, who was at the side, laughed coldly and said, "You wouldn't have known if you hadn't seen them. The people of the heavenly gates are indeed arrogant and overbearing. Whose power are you relying on? Jun Wuxian?" There's not much of a difference between the 4th and 5th on the sovereign ranking. Although Kuang Xieyue was now targeting Chu Xiu, who was from the hidden devil bloodline, Dong Huangtai already had a good impression of Chu Xiu. Moreover, he really could not bear to see people from Elysium being so arrogant. The righteous and demonic wars had just ended. Their moon-worshipping cult had fought against all the heroes of the righteous path, and Yi Xiaonan had fought several powerhouses alone without being defeated, securing the 5th position on the sovereign list. Even the moon-worshipping cult wasn't this arrogant, so why was the heavenly gates so arrogant? Moreover, in the eyes of Dong Huangtai, apart from being inferior to the legendary Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji, his sect master might be qualified to fight against Zhong Xinxiu of Freedom Sky and Jun Wuxian of Elysium. Seeing that he had provoked public anger, Kuang Xieyue's face didn't show any timidity, embarrassment, or anger. He just laughed twice. TSK, you guys really don't have a sense of humor. It was just a joke. Did you take it seriously? Kuang Xieyue's performance was very real, but only Chu Xiu knew that he had used all his strength in that grab just now. However, after hearing Kuang Xieyue's words, no one present wanted to fight with him right now. They could only snort coldly and give up for the time being. Chu Xiu retreated behind Wei Shuya, but his eyes were fixed on Kuang Xieyue. They were both Heavenly Gate Divine Generals, but Kuang Xieyue and Divine Lord Luo gave off a completely different feeling. Immortal Lord Luo's character was tyrannical and unreasonable. He did not take anyone seriously and looked down on everyone as though they were ants. That was why he had barged into the Guanzhong torture room, killed Guan Siyu, and dug up Chu Kuang's mausoleum. However, Kuang Xieyue had a neurotic look and was moody. No one could figure out what he was thinking. Just like what happened just now, even if he really had some ulterior motives towards Chu Xiu, a normal person would not make a move in front of the warriors of the Yinma clan. However, Kuang Xieyue had done so. He was also a madman who did not consider the consequences at all. Chu Xiu rubbed his head. Being targeted by such a person was much more troublesome than facing Yuan Tianfang, who always wanted to take revenge on him. This was because Chu Xiu clearly knew what Yuan Tianfang wanted and what he was afraid of. However, he could not figure out what Kuang Xieyue was thinking. Chu Xiu asked Lu Jianghu in his mind, "By the way, how much do you know about the Heavenly Gate? What do you think the Heavenly Gate is?" "A bunch of good-for-nothings," Lu Jianghu said concisely. "What?" Chu Xiu looked at Lu Jianghu in shock. "Are you sure you're talking about the Heavenly Gate, one of the eastern and western heavens? You're just a hall leader of the Blood Demon Hall. You don't have to be so arrogant, do you?" Lu Jianghu shrugged and said, "You can ask all the warriors who came from the holy sect. They will all answer like this. The leader of the Heavenly Gate was easily killed by the sect leader. 8 of the 9 great divine generals were killed by the sect leader and 1 was disabled. The entire eastern Kunlun mountain range would have become the vegetable garden of the holy sect if the sect leader had not shown mercy. If such an existence is not good for nothing, then what is? In fact, the Heavenly Gate is no different from most of the sects in the Jianghu that were destroyed by the sect leader. The only difference is that the other sects were killed by the sect leader in one move, but the Heavenly Gate took a few moves and was stronger. Chu Xiu secretly shook his head. Dugu Weiwei was too abnormal in the past. Compared to him, everyone was indeed good for nothing. However, Chu Xiu thought about it again. Last time when he absorbed Dugu Weiwei's drop of blood, the image left by Dugu Weiwei seemed to say, "I am you, you are me." Does that mean that I am also abnormal? At this moment, when Pu Yangyi saw that everyone had calmed down, he said, "Everyone, the array formation has been opened. I wonder how everyone wishes to be teleported over." Su Yan frowned and said, "How do we teleport? Could there be a problem with this space?" Pu Yangyi said, "Back then, the people who laid this array formation should not have been from just one faction. Instead, over 10 factions worked together to lay this array formation. Hence, by relying on this array formation, we can directly teleport to the bases of those 10-odd factions in this secret realm. However, some of the array formations in this secret realm are already damaged, so we can only teleport to 6 of them. Of course, everyone can also mess up the array formation and teleport to a random location." Everyone present exchanged glances and discussed for a while. Finally, they chose to teleport to a random location. There were over 10 factions warriors present, but there were only 6 teleportation locations. No matter how they chose, there would definitely be a fight over it. However, they still didn't know how big this space secret realm was, and they didn't know what was in it. It was too rash to start fighting as soon as they teleported in. Although random teleportation depended on luck, it could also avoid such things as much as possible. After coming to a conclusion, as Pu Yangyi opened the array formation, everyone also stepped in one by one. Before Wei Shuya entered, he transmitted his voice to Chu Xiu, "Be careful of Guangxieyue. The people of Elysium have always been secretive. No one knows what they want to do. You have been targeted by Guangxieyue. If there is a problem, escape first. Don't show off." Wei Shuya was also frightened by Chu Xiu's courage. In a short period of time, this person went against the flow and killed 2 true fire spirit refinement realm existences. Wei Shuya was also afraid that Chu Xiu would get carried away and go against Guangxieyue. The gap between the true fire spirit refinement realm was quite large, just like the gap between the real pellet realm. At least, whether it was Fang Jinwu or Yuan Tianfang, they were not qualified to be compared with Guangxieyue. Chu Xiu nodded. Without Yuan Tianfang saying anything, Chu Xiu also knew that Chu Xiu would not get carried away without a certain degree of certainty. Of course, if he was sure, Chu Xiu didn't mind killing an Elysium divine general. After all, if what Dugu Weiwei said was true, then 500 years ago, he had already killed a sect master and 8 divine generals. A golden light flashed in front of him. When Chu Xiu opened his eyes again, there was no one around him. There was no aura of martial artists' activity within a radius of more than 10 miles. After sensing the surrounding aura, Chu Xiu began to look around. This secret realm only gave Chu Xiu a feeling that it was a paradise, but it was a paradise that was smashed by someone with a hammer. The surrounding yuan qi of the universe was extremely dense, and all sorts of strange flowers and plants were blooming. Although they had grown in a mess, one could tell that they had been meticulously planted here in the past. After taking care of them, they would definitely grow into a magnificent appearance. Under the weeds and trees, he could also see a paved bluestone road, which was extremely clean. Along the way, there were many courtyards or small temples for people to rest. From these things, one could see how prosperous this secret realm was in the past. However, at this moment, most of the courtyards and temples had already collapsed. Some places on the ground had also become extremely messy, as if an earth dragon had flipped over. As Chu Xiu walked along the road, he could already confirm that this place was indeed a secret realm in ancient times where the major forces and sects were stationed all year round. It was used for meetings or for seclusion and recuperation. However, these major sects were also wasteful enough. Such a treasure land, they did not even plant any spiritual herbs and the like. They actually used it to plant some highly ornamental trees and flowers. As Chu Xiu walked along the road, he basically did not see any spiritual herbs suitable for alchemy. At this moment, he suddenly felt some movement in front of him. It seemed that there was also the aura of martial artists fighting. Chu Xiu immediately walked in that direction and looked through the dense jungle. A magnificent white jade palace stood in it, but unfortunately, the white jade palace was smashed in half by a huge meteorite. At this time, in front of the white jade palace, the two brothers of the Sun family, Sun Qili and Sun Qifan, the two martial Dao masters of the Lu family of Gao Ping, and Cheng Tingshan of the Hidden Sword Villa were confronting each other. Obviously, everyone wanted to take the lead and monopolize the white jade palace. Among the three parties, the relationship between the Sun family of River East and the Lu family of Gao Ping was considered good. However, in the face of treasures, the so-called relationship was nothing. Moreover, the two martial Dao masters of the Lu family of Gao Ping were not very famous in Jianghu. They were inferior to the Sun brothers. Of course, they did not want to give the treasure to others. Although Cheng Tingfeng was alone, he was someone who had been on the list after all. The real strength of the Hidden Sword Villa did not lie in the people, but in the swords they carried. Only God knew what kind of treasured weapon Cheng Tingshan had brought from the Hidden Sword Villa this time. He was not afraid to face the other party alone or in pairs. Just when everyone was in a dilemma, whether to fight it out first to decide the ownership of the place or not to waste time and explore together, Chu Xiu happened to walk over from the side. The moment they saw Chu Xiu, the five people stood together almost at the same time with vigilance in their eyes. At least they were on the same side, and their strength was not much different. However, Chu Xiu was no longer on the same side as them. Just when Cheng Tingshan wanted to warn Chu Xiu first, Chu Xiu had already spoken with a smile on his face. This place is not bad. Thank you for helping me find it. Now, you can leave. Chapter 8:13. Chu Xiu's extremely arrogant attitude almost instantly infuriated Cheng Tingshan and the other two groups. It's true that you, Chu Xiu, have a great reputation in Jianghu, and the hidden devil lineage is also very powerful now. But they are not to be trifled with. Why did you, Chu Xiu, ask them to scram the moment he came up? The three groups of people who were still at loggerheads immediately stood together. Cheng Tingshan said coldly, Chu Xiu, who do you think you are? Do you really think that you can be comparable to an expert in the true fire spirit refining realm just because you killed a true fire spirit refining realm expert with a trick? Chu Xiu said indifferently, I have always known who I am, but unfortunately, you have not seen who you are. A wise man submits to circumstances. Since you don't want to scram, then I will help you scram. As soon as he finished speaking, the heavenly demon dance in Chu Xiu's hand was already unsheathed. The monstrous devil qi mixed with endless blood qi and the wailing of hungry ghosts slashed towards Cheng Tingshan and the other four people. All along, most of Chu Xiu's enemies were much stronger than him. Against people like Fang Jinwu and Yuan Tianfang, Chu Xiu could only use all sorts of crafty plots and schemes, and only after spending a great deal of effort to scheme against them could he kill them. But in fact, most of the time, Chu Xiu did not like to do so. Why make a problem that could be solved with one/so complicated? Just like now, I have my eyes on this palace. Will you give it to me? If you don't, then I will beat you until you do. He did not know if it was because he knew about his relationship with Dugu Weiwei, but subconsciously, Chu Xiu also thought that Dugu Weiwei's way of doing things was very much to his liking. Under the premise of having absolute power, there was no need to do so many useless things. There was only one word, kill. The power of Chu Xiu's slash caused Cheng Tingshan's expression to suddenly change. In fact, Cheng Tingshan had fought with Chu Xiu more than once. In the past, before Chu Xiu reached the real pellet state, he had already fought with Chu Xiu. Of course, he was at a disadvantage in that battle. If there were no others present this time, he would not dare to say this to Chu Xiu, and he would probably scram. However, he had never expected Chu Xiu's power foundation to be so powerful. In just a few short years of cultivation, Chu Xiu's power foundation was already stronger than what he had cultivated for decades. Cheng Tingshan unsheathed the 7 long swords behind him. One was a divine weapon, and the other 6 were precious weapons. Under the control of his aura, the 7 long swords condensed into the Big Dipper 7 stars sword array. In an instant, the starlight shone, and it greeted Chu Xiu's slash. But under the endless surging demonic qi, the entire Big Dipper 7 stars sword array collapsed in an instant. 6 of the 7 long swords shattered in an instant, and only one of the divine weapons did not shatter, blocking Chu Xiu's slash. But Cheng Tingshan was also shocked back step by step. At this moment, the Sun brothers had already made a move. One of them punched out, while the other landed a palm strike. Cold ice gang qi erupted with a loud rumble, as if the surroundings, which were like spring all year round, had turned into a frigid winter. The 2 martial artists of the Gao Ping Lu family held long spears in their hands, and they stabbed at Chu Xiu at the same time. The power was also very powerful. When the spear fell, it was like thunder falling from the sky, making bursts of roars and roars. It was said that the Gao Ping Lu family was born in the military, and the ancestor of the Lu family was a general in the dynasty before Eastern Qi. Because of the enmity with the imperial court, he resigned and lived in seclusion. There were very few martial artists in the Jianghu who used the spear as their weapon. The Gao Ping Lu family was born in the military, so the strongest spear technique passed down in their family, the 9th Heaven Thunder Meteorite Spear, could be said to be a sharp weapon in the military. Its power might be a bit ordinary, but if the people of the Lu family used this spear technique together, the power would not be as simple as 1 + 1. The 4 people besieged him. Chu Xiu formed a seal with his hand and displayed the Great Blood Shadow technique. In an instant, the blood roared, and the blood shadows directly met the 4 people around him. All kinds of martial arts exploded, and the 4 people were actually forced to retreat. At the same time, Chu Xiu's figure did not stop at all. He directly slashed at Cheng Tingshan with his blade. Under the powerful momentum of the blade, Cheng Tingshan did not even have the chance to fight back, and could only retreat step by step. Even the divine weapon in his hand, under the attack of the Sky Demon Dance, let out a sorrowful cry, and a crack appeared on its surface. Cheng Tingshan gritted his teeth, and did not even dare to say a word. He directly turned and fled. The martial artists of the Hidden Sword Villa loved their swords as much as their lives. Right now, if he was attacked by Chu Xiu until he vomited blood, he might not retreat. But now that his divine weapon was damaged, he really did not want to fight anymore. Cheng Tingshan's retreat had caused the other 4 to be trapped there. Chu Xiu turned around, and the blood-red demonic qi around him flourished. At that moment, the 4 people who were desperately resisting the blood shadows felt the blood in their bodies begin to boil uncontrollably, as if it was about to rush out of their bodies. Chu Xiu held the Sky Demon Dance in his hand and slashed horizontally in all directions. As the blade fell, the blood in the 4 people's bodies seemed to respond to Chu Xiu's blade, and violently boiled and collided, causing them to vomit blood in an instant. With one slash, all 4 of them were injured. Seeing this scene, the 4 people did not even have the mood to continue fighting. They immediately turned and fled. Moreover, they were afraid that Chu Xiu would pursue them, so they fled in 4 different directions. Looking at their fleeing figures, the corners of Chu Xiu's mouth curled up. But before he could speak, Lu Jianghu spoke on behalf of Chu Xiu in his mind. What a bunch of trash. This group of people is getting worse with each generation. Those fellows from the Hidden Sword Villa have collected a bunch of divine weapons, but the people they use are such trash. It's an insult to the divine swords. The descendants of that old turtle from the Sun family aren't much better. They stay by the river every day, and their strength has also become so weak. It's a pity for the Liu family. Back then, there was someone from the Liu family who dared to challenge the Red Lotus Demon Lord with a spear. Although he died very miserably, he still had the courage. Now, it seems that the Liu family doesn't even have the spear in their pants, let alone the spear in their hands. They're just cowards. Lu Jianghe's tone was one of exasperation. 500 years ago, the pugilistic world was also full of experts and heroes. But now, only this bunch of people were left? Chu Xiu, on the other hand, felt that this was very normal. In times of crisis, countless heroes would naturally emerge. But now that the pugilistic world had been at peace for 500 years, most of the major forces in the pugilistic world were focused on scheming against each other. In such an environment, it was obvious what kind of people could be produced. And now, after Cheng Tingshan and the others had fled, they gathered together and were still blaming each other. The Sun brothers and the people from the Liu family of Gao Ping accused Cheng Tingshan of fleeing first and leaving them there. Moreover, Cheng Tingshan still had a trump card, but he did not use it. The box that Cheng Tingshan was carrying on his back definitely contained the most powerful divine sword that the hidden sword villa had collected, but he did not use it just now. When Cheng Tingshan heard that, he also scolded the other party for being too useless. He had already stalled Chu Xiu, but in the end, the four of them could not even defeat those blood shadows. They could not even get close to Chu Xiu. After the group of people scolded each other, they had no choice but to turn around and continue searching for other relics and resources. Right now, they had just entered the ruins. Who would be willing to risk their lives now? Moreover, there were three groups of people, and they were not of the same mind. If they risked their lives, what about the others? On the other side, Chu Xiu had already entered the White Jade Palace. The White Jade Palace looked extremely magnificent and luxurious from the outside, and it was almost the same inside. There were carved beams and painted pillars everywhere, but the patterns were completely different from the current style. There were some inscriptions that even Chu Xiu could not recognize. Walking further in, there was a half-collapsed hall, surrounded by a circle of exquisite tables and chairs. Chu Xiu also noticed that there were names written on them, but Chu Xiu didn't recognize them. It felt like they were right, but at the same time, they weren't. The current language was inherited from the ancient age. Although it was somewhat different, most of the cultivation technique manuals were written in the ancient age. Chu Xiu could also recognize it, but the language here was confusing. Chu Xiu really could not recognize it. At this moment, Lu Jianghe chuckled and said, "Country bumpkins, right? You junior cultivators are ignorant and incompetent." In the past, when this senior just started cultivating, not to mention these things, I learned array Dao, alchemy Dao, weapon forging, and everything else. This senior will teach you. This language is a kind of ancient array pattern. It is obscure and simple, but it is a language that the ancestors of my human race comprehended from the truth of the world. It can absorb a small amount of world energy on its own. However, because these characters were too ancient, so ancient that they couldn't describe things in too much detail, they were abandoned. But on some important occasions, some ancient sects are still willing to use this language to write something short. Chu Xiu ignored Lu Jianghe's smugness and just asked, "What is written on it?" Lu Jianghe said, "It's all the names of some ancient sections: 3 Pure Temple, High Heaven Sect, Heavenly Luo Temple." Hiss. These are the names of those ancient sections. Boy, you have picked up a treasure. This may be the place where those ancient sects hold meetings or preach. Although this is not the ruins of a sect, and you probably won't be able to find any cultivation techniques or anything like that, but in ancient times, it was common for powerhouses to preach the Tao. If you can find some of the experiences and insights recorded by others, it will be of great benefit to you. The ancient times were also a flourishing age of martial arts. Compared to the present, the ancient times may have been more abundant in world yuan qi, so the strength of cultivators was stronger and cultivation was easier. In that era, preaching the Tao was very popular. The masters of all the major sects liked to open forums and preach the Tao. Moreover, there was no discrimination. As long as they were not from hostile sects, they would come to listen to the preaching. Of course, the preaching was only about the experience of martial arts, not about the cultivation techniques of their own sections. At present, this hall was extremely magnificent, and there were the participation of 3 Pure Temple, High Heaven sect, and other top sections. One could imagine what kind of existence was qualified to preach the Tao here. Chu Xiu had indeed picked up a treasure. Chapter 8:14. When Cheng Tingshan and the others found this place, they began to confront each other even before they entered. If they had seen what was inside, they probably would not have let it go so easily. Chu Xiu rummaged back and forth in the palace and found some records engraved on jade talismans or animal skin papers. Almost all the people who came to participate in the sermon brought back what they had recorded. The sermon records that Chu Xiu had found should have been used by the preacher's disciples and grand disciples as records. They directly wrote down the preacher's description verbatim. Although it seemed a little obscure and difficult to understand, it was less indifferent and closer to the preacher's original meaning. These things could not be digested in a short time, so Chu Xiu only glanced at them briefly and put them away. He planned to carefully study them when he went into seclusion in the future. However, at this time, Chu Xiu found a very strange record in a corner. It was not a record of martial arts explanations, but a meeting record from ancient times. It recorded a discussion that had taken place here, mixed with some of the ideas of the person who recorded it. The content was much more interesting. Longu Calendar, Gui Hai Year, 17th of September, 3:45 a.m. The sects of the northern region held a meeting to discuss the great plan of opening up the world. The eminent monk of Tianluo Temple said, "All the worlds in the world have experienced the 4 tribulations of completion, rebirth, destruction, and emptiness. These are the tribulations of the heavens, and it is difficult to preserve even a glimmer of life. It is better to leave the secret box and pass it on. After the 4 tribulations, a new world will be formed and the world will be reopened." The Taoist master of the 3 Pristines Temple said, "Nonsense. The Taoist lineage has experienced hundreds of millions of tribulations to survive. There are 50 great ways, 49 heavenly evolutions, and only one is human. If you don't find a glimmer of life and wait for death, you deserve to die under the tribulations." Note, I think the Taoist master of the 3 Pristines Temple has a point. We martial artists cultivate ourselves and understand the world. We exchange our weak bodies for great power. If we only know how to surrender in the face of tribulations, wouldn't we be too useless? Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. It seemed that regardless of whether it was the ancient times or the present, these so-called supreme powerhouses were actually more or less the same. They would also curse when they were angry. The Tao master of the 3 Pristines Palace was a man of temperament. During such a discussion, he even dared to point at the other party's nose and scold them. The Imperial Sky Pavilion's pavilion master said that the great building is about to collapse. Regardless of whether we're going to sit here and wait for death or find another way out, we'll have to do it together. The plan to split open the heavens must be carried out, so we must make preparations early. The great calamity is already looming, and it will be too late if we delay. The eminent monk of the heavenly Luo Temple said, "The martial artists of my generation have gone through a tribulation, and so have the myriad worlds. Rumor has it that after experiencing the tribulation of the myriad worlds, the supreme sky of freedom would be formed. Those who entered it would become immortal and become gods. All of you, by splitting open the sky, you are actually going against the heavens, destroying the karma and destiny of this world. You will no longer have the qualifications to enter the sky of freedom. You are harming others, and you are harming yourself. Note, the legend of the Sky of Freedom has existed for countless years. The Buddhists often call it the Sky of Ultimate Bliss, while the Daoists call it the Sky of Longevity. Of course, most people still call it the Sky of Freedom. Rumor has it that in that place, there will be no end to the world, and no one will live, grow old, get sick, or die. It is the residence of gods and Buddhas, and those who enter it will become gods and Buddhas, but does such a place really exist? Others might believe it, but I don't. If everyone becomes immortal and gives birth to children, wouldn't the Sky of Freedom be filled to the brim? Would it still be the Sky of Freedom? Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows. Why was the Sky of Freedom brought up again? He had never heard of this name before. You've heard of the Sky of Freedom? Chu Xiu suddenly asked Lu Jianghe. Lu Jianghe thought for a while and said, the Master of the Eastern Sea of Freedom? After hearing Lu Jianghe's words, Chu Xiu suddenly remembered that the Master of the Eastern Sea of Freedom was in the eastern and western heavens. Could it be that the mysterious Master of the Sky of Freedom was related to the ancient legend of the Sky of Freedom? Or was it that the other party had only heard of this name by chance and thought it sounded good, so he used it as the name of his sect? Chu Xiu was a little confused, so he ignored his doubts and continued reading. High Heaven Sect Master said, freedom and longevity are all fabricated. In the face of the great calamity, we do not seek longevity, but seize every moment. If you can't come to the plan of splitting the heavens, my High Heaven Sect will do it. Sects of the Northern Territory, as long as you are a subordinate of my High Heaven Sect, can submit candidates to participate in the plan of splitting the heavens, but the number of people is limited, and each sect may only have a few people qualified to participate. If you don't want to come, make room for others. Note, the High Heaven Sect Master is decisive and domineering, and should be a role model for our generation. The Three Pure Temples Dao Venerable said, my Three Pure Temple agrees, as long as you belong to the Dao sects, the Northern Territory, the Eastern Territory, and the Southern Territory can come to participate in the plan of splitting the heavens. The great calamity is coming, but you bald donkeys are guarding the Western Territory without making any progress, while my Dao sect has already paid with countless lives. Spiritual Treasure Temple's Temple Master, Daoist Crimson Afterglow, in order to protect a county in the Northern Territory, turned his body into the light of the spiritual treasure to suppress the dragon vein, and died. There are only 2 people left in the entire Spiritual Treasure Temple. If we don't think of a way, how many of our 3,000 Dao sects will be left in the end? Note, sad. Sad. Spiritual Treasure Temple is one of the few sects in the world that can think for the common people. It is said that in order to resist the great calamity and save the common people, the Spiritual Treasure Temple had 37 people, and only 2 were left. Even the Daoist priest in the kitchen died in the great calamity. Spiritual Treasure Temple's selection of disciples is based on character, comprehension, and talent. Therefore, it is extremely difficult to accept disciples. So many years of hard work have been destroyed in a day. Spiritual Treasure Temple's Temple Master, Daoist Crimson Afterglow, was the most hopeful to step into the martial immortal realm among the martial artists who have reached the heaven and earth metaphysic realm. If he took the last step, Dao sect will have one more Dao Master. What a pity. However, I heard that Dao Master and Daoist Crimson Afterglow had a grudge in the early years. Now that Daoist Crimson Afterglow is dead, and Spiritual Treasure Temple is on the verge of destruction, is Dao Master sincere in his grief, or is he just pretending? Thinking back to a few years ago, I met Daoist Crimson Afterglow's eldest disciple, Daoist Ling Qingzi, and I was impressed by his demeanor. I wonder if Daoist Ling Qingzi escaped the calamity. Dragon Martial Calendar, Year Gue Hai, 17th of September, Shenshi. Many sects parted on bad terms. Those who agree with the plan of opening the heavens occupy 60%, those who disagree occupy 20%, and the remaining 20% are undecided. Putting away the record, Chu Xiu let out a long sigh. If this thing were to spread, it would definitely cause an uproar in the outside world. This record had already explained a lot of things. As the great calamity of the ancient times approached, those sects did not choose to sit still and wait for death. Instead, they thought of many ways to save themselves, and this plan of opening the heavens was one of them. However, which heavens was this plan of opening the heavens? As for what the so-called sky of freedom was all about, even the ancient sects themselves might not be able to explain it clearly. Moreover, there was a description of the martial immortal realm. It was estimated that it would also cause an uproar. Chu Xiu once found the diary of the little junior brother of spiritual treasure temple in the small mortal realm. It had already said that the big senior brother of spiritual treasure temple was already a martial arts master of the real pellet realm, and his master was a powerhouse of the mysterious heaven and earth realm. However, looking at the notes on this diary, it was obvious that there was a realm above the mysterious heaven and earth realm called martial immortal. In ancient times, there were many people who reached this realm, such as the Tao Master of the Three Pristines Temple. It should be a title. Only those who reached the martial immortal realm were qualified to be called Tao Master. The powerhouses that appeared in the records, the monks of Tianluo Treasure Temple, the Pavilion Master of Royal Sky Pavilion, and the Sect Master of High Heaven Sect were obviously at the same level as the Tao Master. They must have reached the martial immortal realm. Do you know anything about the martial immortal realm? Chu Xiu asked Lu Jianghe. Lu Jianghe said, "Of course I know." Hearing Lu Jianghe's words, Chu Xiu was taken aback. "You know? Why haven't I heard anyone mention it?" Lu Jianghe said disdainfully, "I don't know about the martial immortal realm, but there is a path above the mysterious heaven and earth realm. Even an idiot knows about it, okay? Think about it. What is the level of the current mysterious heaven and earth realm? In the past, these so-called mysterious heaven and earth realm powerhouses were simply vulnerable in front of the sect master. The sect master of that generation was also in the mysterious heaven and earth realm, but what was the result? Wasn't he still slaughtered by the sect master like a chicken? The sect master has never said that he has surpassed the mysterious heaven and earth realm, but in my opinion, he has already crossed that step long ago. And Ning Xuanji, he can fight evenly with the sect master and is called an immortal. With his strength, does he deserve the title of martial immortal? Chu Xiu patted his head. He had experienced a lot of things recently and was greatly impacted, so he didn't see it as clearly as Lu Jianghe. Not hearing about it didn't mean it didn't exist, but there were too few people in this realm. Because of the loss of ancient books, no one had passed down the name of this realm. So even if Ning Xuanji and Dugu Weiwei had really reached this realm, they might not even know what their realm was called. Chu Xiu didn't delve too deeply into these things. He carefully searched the palace for a while, and after finding nothing good, he prepared to leave. During this period of time, Kuang Xieyue was also wandering around. Unlike the urgency of the others, who were hurriedly looking for opportunities in the secret realm, afraid that something would go wrong and cause them to end up with nothing, Kuang Xieyue, on the other hand, was extremely leisurely. It was as if he was taking a walk, looking left and right, and even admiring the surrounding scenery. He couldn't be more leisurely. At this moment, he suddenly felt some movement in front of him. He walked over and saw that it was Cheng Tingshan and the other four. They had just finished arguing and were about to leave. At this moment, they were still wondering if they should explore alone or continue working together. When they suddenly saw Kuang Xieyue, the expressions on their faces immediately changed. The divine generals of the heavenly gates were considered top-notch existences even among the true fire spirit refinement realm powerhouses. They didn't know what the other party's attitude was, good or evil. Seeing the five of them, a smile appeared at the corner of Kuang Xieyue's mouth. He said, "Everyone, did you find anything good? If I'm satisfied, you can leave. If I'm not, I'll kill you." Chapter 8:15. Kuang Xieyue was a lunatic, a temperamental lunatic. This was what Chu Xiu thought. In fact, he was indeed temperamental. Similar to Divine Lord Luo, he did not take the people of the Jianghu seriously. To be precise, he did not take the people of the Jianghu seriously at all. Other people of the Jianghu had rules, but the Elysium had no rules. The people of the Elysium only followed their own rules. As for the others, he could kill them if he wanted. Sword Concealment Villa, River East Sun Clan, to Guangxieyue, killing them all depended on his mood. Just like now, if Cheng Tingshan and the rest's answers made him happy, he would not kill them. If he was not happy, what he said just now was not a joke. Cheng Tingshan and the rest's expressions changed immediately. Before this, they were still cursing Chu Xiu for being overbearing and snatching the relics that they had discovered first. But now they realized that Chu Xiu's overbearing was considered good. This person was completely unreasonable. At this moment, Cheng Tingshan suddenly thought of something. He immediately said, "Sir, we discovered a huge palace relic, but Chu Xiu snatched it before we could enter. Now Chu Xiu should still be there. If you are interested, we can lead the way for you." Guangxieyue's face showed a hint of interest. "Oh? Is that so? If that's the case, I'll be very happy. Bring me there." Cheng Tingshan also suddenly thought of what happened between Guangxieyue and Chu Xiu. This divine general of the Elysium seemed to be very interested in Chu Xiu. Cheng Tingshan could also kill him with a borrowed knife. But at this moment, Guangxieyue added, "Of course, if I don't find Chu Xiu, I'll still kill you." Cheng Tingshan and the rest's expressions changed. They finally knew what it meant to be temperamental. But they did not dare to resist. The lunatics of the Elysium would not care about their background, let alone the rules of the Jianghu. Chu Xiu had just walked out of the palace when he bumped into Guangxieyue and the others. Looking at Chu Xiu, Guangxieyue's lips curled into a smile. "Kid, you won't be able to escape from my palm. Don't worry, I don't have any evil intentions towards you. I just want to study how you scared that fellow, Divine Lord Luo, to the point that he crawled back to the Divine Gate. Tsk tisk, it's rare to see that guy in such a sorry state. I'm really curious. Just cooperate with me. Don't worry, it won't hurt." Guangxieyue had just finished speaking when Chu Xiu's demonic aura gathered around him. Two giant hands made of demonic aura rose from behind him, releasing an extreme demonic might. A longbow had already been condensed. With one hand on the bow and 3 arms on the bowstring, the triple-link city-destroying arrow was shot out in an instant. Everything in its path was annihilated. No one, not even Guangxieyue himself, had expected Chu Xiu's attack to be so swift and fierce. In fact, the moment he saw the triple-link city-destroying arrow, his expression became a little dazed. He had seen this arrow before. The Divine Gate had once preserved the video of Dugu Weiwei killing the master of the Divine Gate and slaughtering the 8 great divine generals. Every disciple who joined the Divine Gate had to watch it because it was a disgrace. The disgrace of the Divine Gate. Although it was strange that after the decline of the Kunlun devil cult in the later stages, the master of the Divine Gate had forbidden his disciples from finding trouble with the Kunlun devil cult. However, this video was something that every disciple who joined the Divine Gate had to watch, and they had to watch it very carefully. In the past, Dugu Weiwei had used this arrow to pierce through 2 divine generals of the Divine Gate at the same time, as if he was killing chickens. The 2 of them were skewered together, and then they died. Guangxieyue would never forget that scene for the rest of his life. However, the power of the arrow shot by Chu Xiu clearly could not be compared to that of Dugu Weiwei. In fact, it was not even qualified to be compared. Guangxieyue stretched out his hands, and the sparkling moonlight appeared in his hands. Although the sky was clear, it was as if there was a bright moon in the sky. Everything was destroyed wherever the triple city extinguishing arrow passed. Even the moonlight dissipated. However, at this moment, Kuang Xieyue put his hands together, and the moonlight shone brightly. The triple city extinguishing arrow was forcibly held in his hands. With a loud bang, the moonlight and the arrow were extinguished at the same time. Fishing the moon from the water, turning the hand to grasp the sky. Cheng Tingshan and the other four were dumbfounded as they watched the exchange between the two of them. In the past 2 years, Chu Xiu had been hanging around in the northern Yan land. Although his reputation was often spread in the Jianghu, Cheng Tingshan and the other four did not have a direct understanding of his strength. Even though they had already felt that Chu Xiu was very strong, it was not until Chu Xiu used the triple city extinguishing arrow that they realized that Chu Xiu was actually this strong. Apart from Cheng Tingshan, who could use his trump card, the divine sword, to block the power of this arrow, everyone else would definitely die. Of course, what shocked them even more was Kuang Xieyue. If Chu Xiu's strength was only strong, then Kuang Xieyue's strength was so strong that it made people tremble. The triple annihilation city arrow was so powerful, yet he was able to block it in one move. Wasn't this powerful enough? The violent demonic energy and moonlight shattered, but Chu Xiu had already disappeared. But at this moment, the smile on Kuang Xieyue's face had already slowly disappeared, and a trace of killing intent had already appeared. Boy, you're courting death. Previously, Kuang Xieyue was only interested in Chu Xiu because of Divine Lord Luo. But now, he wanted to crush Chu Xiu, who dared to resist him, to death. But at the same time, Kuang Xieyue was also puzzled. Had Divine Lord Luo been scared off because he saw this arrow? This was somewhat illogical. What Chu Xiu had used was indeed the triple city extinguishing arrow that he had inherited from Dugu Weiwei. But thinking of his identity as the inheritor of the hidden devil bloodline, it was not strange that he could obtain a part of Dugu Weiwei's martial arts from the past. Just like just now, Kuang Xieyue only thought of those scenes in the past and was a little absent-minded, but he did not really think that Chu Xiu was Dugu Weiwei. Although Kuang Xieyue often ridiculed Divine Lord Luo in the Elysium, he also knew that Divine Lord Luo should not be so timid. Kuang Xieyue's eyes flashed with killing intent. He murmured, "Forget it. After I catch you, I'll cut you open and see what you're hiding." As soon as he finished speaking, Kuang Xieyue's figure had already turned into a moonlight and disappeared. Cheng Tingshan and the others immediately heaved a sigh of relief. Being next to such a temperamental and abnormally powerful guy like Kuang Xieyue was extremely stressful. And then the 5 of them began to gloat. "Who asked you, Chu Xiu, to rob us of our opportunities and benefits?" Now that they could not get the things in the palace, Chu Xiu could not either. Being targeted by such an abnormally powerful expert, even if Chu Xiu did not die, he would definitely not feel good. Cheng Tingshan and the others were right. At the moment, Chu Xiu was indeed not feeling good. The moment Kuang Xieyue appeared, Chu Xiu already knew what he was going to do. Therefore, he made a prompt decision to attack and use all his strength to repel his opponent, creating time for himself to escape. But he did not expect that the Elysium Divine Generals would all be so strong. Divine Lord Luo was very strong, and so was Kuang Xieyue. If all the Elysium Divine Generals appeared in the underworld, they would probably be able to take over the entire reputation list. Even Yuan Tianfang had to use all his strength to withstand Chu Xiu's triple city destroying arrow. He did not even dare to make the slightest mistake. One mistake and he would be seriously injured. Yet, in the hands of Kuang Xieyue, it was so effortless. Seeing this, Chu Xiu did not have the intention to fight back. At the moment, Chu Xiu's speed had been raised to the extreme by him. The internal binding seal of the fast and slow 9 words formula was originally known for its speed. However, this speed was only used in fierce combat, as it consumed a lot of vital qi when used over long distances. But now, Chu Xiu relied on his profound strength. He had already exerted the internal binding seal to the extreme and used it to escape. His speed was like flowing light. If one did not look carefully, one would not be able to see Chu Xiu's figure clearly. However, Chu Xiu could still feel the extreme killing intent coming from behind him. Kuang Xieyue's speed was not inferior to his, and was even faster. An hour later, a flowing light appeared behind Chu Xiu. Kuang Xieyue sneered and said, "Run? Why don't you keep running? Originally, I was going to let you live after studying you. That would be giving face to those old guys from the Yinma clan. But now, I don't want to study the living anymore. Studying the dead is the same." Moonlight condensed in Kuang Xieyue's hand. The white moonlight was so solid that it actually condensed into a crescent moon scimitar in his hand. As his scimitar slashed down, the whole space seemed to be cut open. Under the power of the scimitar, no matter how fast Chu Xiu's speed was, he could not outrun the space that was being cut open. If he continued to run, he would be cut into two before he could escape the range of Kuang Xieyue's scimitar. In an instant, Chu Xiu turned back, drew his scimitar, and slashed. The scimitar's power rushed into the sky, and as the raging waves swept out, it seemed to tear apart and swallow everything in the world. 7 limits, sea breaking. The two powerful scimitars collided, and the whole space seemed to pause. But the next moment, a silent loud sound was heard. Everything around them was torn apart, and the ground was densely covered with scimitar marks that were hundreds of feet long. Kuang Xieyue's scimitar power was broken. He stood where he was and frowned slightly. 7 limits to swallow the heavens and destroy the earth? This scimitar technique should have disappeared after the great ancient calamity. How can someone still know it? Kuang Xieyue seemed relaxed, but Chu Xiu was not feeling well at this moment. During the collision, the terrifying impact even tore his meridians. Fortunately, he had the eternal demon pill, which quickly restored the power in Chu Xiu's body, so he did not vomit blood on the spot. Chapter 8:16. Chu Xiu's heart sank when his sea-cleaving saber did not work. Kuang Xieyue's strength was so deep that even if he went all out, he still could not do anything to him. He could not beat him for the time being. He could not outrun him even if he ran. This was the first time in a long time that Chu Xiu had fallen into such an awkward situation. Kuang Xieyue seemed to have been angered by Chu Xiu's continuous confrontations. He formed a seal with his hands, and moonlight shone around him, forming a hazy moon shadow in the air. Kuang Xieyue bit his fingertip, and blood sprayed out instantly, dyeing the moon shadow red and turning it into a blood moon. Then, it smashed down toward Chu Xiu. The blood moon hung in the sky and fell from the sky. The power was like a landslide, and it directly enveloped an area of thousands of feet around Chu Xiu. The strong pressure sealed the space, leaving no place for Chu Xiu to dodge. Taking a deep breath, the heavenly demon dance in Chu Xiu's hand emitted an extremely pure demonic aura. Lu Jianghe's eyes suddenly shrank. He recognized it. It was the power of Patriarch Dugu. But this power was very faint. Apart from people like him who had followed Dugu Weiwei for decades, no one else could recognize it. In fact, Chu Xiu did not even notice the changes in his own power. As he slashed out with his saber, the entire space seemed to freeze. Like a painting scroll, it was slashed into two by Chu Xiu's saber, and the scarlet blood moon also gradually collapsed. Misty red dust cut. Kuang Xieyue stared at Chu Xiu. This time, he was really surprised. This Chu Xiu could even use the misty red dust cut. Who was he? Is he the second disciple of Dugu Weiwei? If this saber was used by Dugu Weiwei, it might really have the power to cut through space and the world of mortals. But when Chu Xiu used it, it was much weaker. Although Kuang Xieyue's condensed blood moon had been successfully destroyed by that saber strike, he himself had also spat out a mouthful of blood. It was obvious that he had suffered a serious backlash, and his strength had been consumed to the extreme. However, right at this moment, a thick mist of blood blossomed around Chu Xiu's body. He had pushed the demonic blood art to its limits and was actually burning his own blood essence in exchange for his own power. Forming a seal with both hands, Chu Xiu spat out an incantation. In an instant, the sky changed color, and the faint wails of ghosts and deities could be heard. This was the starting stance of the great compassion mantra of heaven and earth. No one had ever been able to complete this technique. Kuang Xieyue didn't know about Chu Xiu's background. Suddenly feeling this power, even Kuang Xieyue's expression changed. Previously, whether it was Chu Xiu's triple destruction city arrow or misty red dust chop, because of Chu Xiu's own body, Kuang Xieyue wasn't afraid of them. But in front of this great compassion mantra of devil wailing heaven, Kuang Xieyue felt an extremely strong threat. This power was enough to hurt his foundation. Kuang Xieyue subconsciously took a few steps back. But at this moment, an even thicker blood mist exploded, and a blood shadow flew out from it at high speed. In the blink of an eye, it had already disappeared without a trace. The horrifying scene in midair that had changed the color of heaven and earth also quickly dispersed. Kuang Xieyue's expression immediately darkened. He had actually been fooled by Chu Xiu. Just now, that was only the starting stance of a technique. Kuang Xieyue thought that Chu Xiu wanted to fight it head-on, but in fact, Chu Xiu wanted to escape. With a cold snort, Kuang Xieyue's figure turned into a stream of light and immediately chased after the blood shadow. Just a quarter of an hour after Kuang Xieyue left, there was a sudden movement on the ground, which had been messed up by the two of them. A crimson cocoon appeared from within. In the end, the bloody aura dissipated, revealing Chu Xiu's face, which was as pale as a sheet of paper. After coming out of the blood cocoon, Chu Xiu didn't waste any time. He immediately left in the opposite direction. After walking for more than 10 miles, he found a hidden place, dug out a cave, and went into seclusion to recuperate. Kuang Xieyue thought that Chu Xiu had fooled him, but in fact, Chu Xiu had another trick up his sleeve. That blood shadow was real. It was a blood shadow of the great blood shadow technique. Chu Xiu endured the pain of severing the connection between him and it, and let it escape with a part of his qi and blood. Because that blood shadow had Chu Xiu's qi and blood, its aura was exactly the same as Chu Xiu's. It wouldn't stop until all the power of qi and blood was completely exhausted. After using the Triple City Annihilation Arrow, Sea Breaker, and Red Dust Slash, which were extremely powerful but also consumed a lot of energy, Chu Xiu's body was almost at the end of its rope. Even if he used the demonic blood power to burn his essence and blood, it would still be useless. Because he didn't have the confidence to defeat Kuang Xieyue with this move. Therefore, he had to use some small tricks to save his life. He cut off a blood shadow to distract the target, and then he hid in the blood cocoon created by the demonic blood power. Because Chu Xiu had burned his qi and blood before, the power of his qi and blood was very strong. Chu Xiu sealed himself in the blood cocoon, so Kuang Xieyue definitely couldn't sense his aura. He could only sense the remaining qi and blood, so he didn't suspect anything and went straight after that blood shadow. Chu Xiu let out a long sigh. It was rare for him to be in such a difficult situation. At this time, Chu Xiu finally understood the benefits of the Eternal Demon Pill, and why it was called the Eternal Demon Pill. If it was anyone else who had suffered such a consumption and backlash from Chu Xiu, they would have already met the King of Hell. But the Eternal Demon Pill in Chu Xiu's body had released a power from the very beginning, preserving the last trace of Chu Xiu's life source and not letting it be damaged. It could even be said that even if Chu Xiu were to fight Kuang Xieyue with his bare arms, the Eternal Demon Pill would still preserve Chu Xiu's last trace of immortality. It was because of the Eternal Demon Pill that Chu Xiu dared to play like this. Otherwise, the great compassion mantra of the Devil's Lament just now would have been enough to squeeze Chu Xiu dry. It took a day and swallowed countless elixirs. Of course, they were not the blood recovery elixirs produced by the Jianghu Hall, but the special healing elixirs that Chu Xiu got from Miracle Dr. Feng Buping. Only then did he recover 90% of his consumed injuries. Recovering to this state in a day was already the limit, and this was with the help of the eternal demon pill. The remaining 10% needed to be recuperated for a period of time, but it wouldn't affect the next battle. Elysium, Guangxieyue. A cold look flashed in Chu Xiu's eyes. He had never suffered such a big loss. Although Chu Xiu was gnashing his teeth at Guangxieyue, he had to admit that the strength of the Elysium was really terrifying. It was known that the Elysium was almost exterminated by Dugu Weiwei. The master of the Elysium was killed, 8 of the 9 divine generals were killed, and 1 was disabled. In the end, relying on such a disabled person, the Elysium returned to its peak within 500 years. This kind of strength was really terrifying. If it were other sects, they might not be able to recover even after thousands of years. After replying, Chu Xiu immediately walked out of the cave where he was cultivating in seclusion. Time could not be delayed in the secret territory. Who knew how long this secret territory could last? After experiencing the great ancient calamity, this kind of space secret territory that existed alone was very unstable and could easily collapse. Therefore, this kind of secret territory usually had a strength limit. If an expert with a certain level of strength entered it, it would cause the secret territory to collapse. Even if no experts entered, if someone triggered some array formation, it might cause the mystic realm to collapse. Therefore, Chu Xiu had to make the best use of his time and continue to explore it. However, as soon as he came out, Chu Xiu sensed that someone was coming. He looked in the direction of the other party and saw a person who was also stunned. He was hundreds of feet away from Chu Xiu, and their gazes met. However, in the next moment, that person immediately turned around and fled. The corner of Chu Xiu's mouth revealed a trace of a sinister smile. The person that Chu Xiu encountered was Duan Tianlang. Just now, when Chu Xiu was being chased, he was in a bad mood. Now that he encountered Duan Tianlang, he could only say that he was unlucky. Duan Tianlang also felt that he was very unlucky. Ever since he entered the mystic realm, he had yet to obtain anything good. Only he and Butiannan from the Blue Dragon Society came here. After the random teleportation, the two of them naturally separated. During this period, he found a few ruins, but they had already been occupied by others. Although the people who entered this place were all competitors, the relationship between them was also very complicated. After the competition, they could also work together without any hindrance. For example, it was normal for the 5 major sword sects or the 9 major families to cooperate. However, the reputation of the Blue Dragon Society in the pugilistic world had always been bad. In addition, with a madman like Butiannan as the leader, the reputation of the Blue Dragon Society was basically similar to that of the demon sections. In this way, no matter who the others chose to ally with, they would not choose to ally with him. Therefore, Duan Tianlang did not obtain anything useful in the past 2 days. In the end, he actually encountered an enemy like Chu Xiu. It was simply bloody bad luck. The speed of the inner binding seal was pushed to the extreme by Chu Xiu. His figure left an afterimage and went straight to Duan Tianlang. In less than a quarter of an hour, the distance between the two had shrunk from 100 feet to about 100 feet. The heavenly demon dance slashed down, and the monstrous demonic energy with an incomparably horrifying bloody aura crashed down with majestic power. Duan Tianlang hurriedly turned around and stretched out his hand. The aura within 100 feet of him completely wrapped around Chu Xiu's slash, wanting to crush it. However, the power of this slash was too great. It directly broke through Duan Tianlang's black spatial divine claw, and the remaining demonic energy instantly blew Duan Tianlang away. In the past, when Duan Tianlang chased after Chu Xiu even had to use all his strength to resist his black spatial divine claw. But now, he also had to use all his strength to resist a casual slash from Chu Xiu, and it was somewhat difficult for him to do so. Everything was predestined. Now that Chu Xiu and Duan Tianlang had completely switched roles, the feeling of revenge was quite good. Chapter 8:17. With just one slash, Duan Tianlang felt a life-and-death crisis. He knew that the gap between him and Chu Xiu was very big, but he didn't expect it to be so big. Duan Tianlang gritted his teeth. Before Chu Xiu slashed for the second time, his whole body was already burning with a majestic power of blood. He actually chose to burn his blood essence to escape. Chu Xiu sneered when he saw this. Burning his blood essence in front of him, Duan Tianlang was courting death. When the blood divine demonic technique was activated, all the surrounding power of blood, whether it was Chu Xiu's own or others, was under his control. In an instant, Duan Tianlang felt that his whole body was boiling. His own blood essence was actually out of his control. Duan Tianlang clenched his teeth as he watched the blood-red shadows fly out from Chu Xiu's surroundings, bringing with them a terrifying aura to attack him. His body was enveloped by a layer of green light, and he disappeared in the blink of an eye like a swimming dragon. Chu Xiu frowned, and he retracted the blood shadow technique. Duan Tianlang really didn't expect this guy to have such a move. This speed was even similar to the speed when Quang Xieyue chased him before. Lu Jianghu sneered and said, "This kid must be afraid of you to the extreme." Chu Xiu said in surprise, "Why do you say so?" Lu Jianghu said, "This kid is using the Blue Dragon Society's Azure Dragon embodiment mystic art, but the real strength of this mystic art is in close combat. It is extremely fierce and powerful, but the backlash is not small. Therefore, only martial artists who have stepped into the real fire god refinement realm can cultivate it." Earlier, Xiao Chen's move was Return of the Azure Dragon. In an instant, he could raise his speed to the limit. However, he now gave up the latter half of the attack, leaving only the first move, so he can barely use it with his real pellet state cultivation. But look at him. Even if he manages to escape, he won't be able to withstand this power. Even if he doesn't die, he'll be heavily injured. Normal people wouldn't cultivate the escaping part of a secret technique. This kid is probably afraid that you'll kill him even in his dreams, so he doesn't learn anything else but the escaping secret technique first. Needless to say, Lu Jianghu's analysis was pretty good. Duan Tianlang really thought so back then. Duan Tianlang flattered Wu Tiannan very clearly. He finally made Wu Tiannan happy and gave him the Azure Dragon Incarnation secret technique, but he could not learn it. This made Duan Tianlang very depressed. However, because he was always worried about Chu Xiu's revenge, he gritted his teeth and took the initiative to learn this life-saving move. He didn't expect to really use it today. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and continued to chase after Duan Tianlang. Duan Tianlang's mystic art definitely couldn't last long. He didn't believe that Duan Tianlang could escape from his palm. However, after chasing for more than 10 miles, the traces became fainter and fainter. This made Chu Xiu a little surprised. Duan Tianlang is actually quite persistent. He can actually hold on until now. Chu Xiu did not plan to continue the chase because he could vaguely hear the sounds of a battle coming from the top of a tall mountain that resembled a longsword. The aura coming from it was very familiar to Chu Xiu. There was Fang Qi Shao, Lu Fengxian, Zhang Chengzhen and Zhong Xian. These four people are so coincidental that they all met at the same time. Chu Xiu directly gave up chasing Duan Tianlang, who had escaped somewhere, and went straight to the peak. The higher he went, the steeper it became. This peak seemed to be deliberately carved out by someone. It was in the shape of a long sword. When Chu Xiu climbed to the top, the four were fighting fiercely. Zhong Xian was holding the Ming King's seal and fighting fiercely with Lu Fengxian. Although Lu Fengxian's strength was not weak, he was still promoted to the real pellet state later than Zhong Xian. Although he was born with divine power, he was not as strong as Zhong Xian's power foundation, so even if he had an unparalleled divine weapon in his hand, he was still suppressed. As for Fang Qishao, it was much more lively. He shouted while fighting with Zhang Chengzhen. It was unknown whether he was bursting out of his talkative attribute or he wanted to use verbal attacks to harass Zhang Chengzhen. Hey, Zhang Chengzhen, you are too much. I found this place first. You, the dignified little celestial master, also want to snatch things? Damn, you are still using weapons. Your slaying evil is ranked 10th in the famous sword manual, and my shocking salamander is only 21st, aren't you embarrassed to take it? If you have the ability, put down your weapon and let's have a fair fight. Bah! Shameless. Where are you going to fight? Do you think a Daoist can't find a woman, and you are jealous of my lower body's sexual happiness? Although Fang Qishao's side was shouting and looked very imposing, he was suppressed by Zhang Chengzhen very badly. The gap between the two could be said to be quite obvious. At this time, when Chu Xiu came, the four people fighting stopped and looked at Chu Xiu. Zhong Xian was expressionless, Zhang Chengzhen moved his eyebrows slightly, and Fang Qishao and Lu Fengxian were all happy. Fang Qishao laughed, ha ha ha. Brother Chu, you came at the right time, let's besiege this shameless Taoist together. To be able to say besieging so openly, it was unknown whether it was Fang Qishao who was shameless or Zhang Chengzhen who was shameless. Chu Xiu didn't make a move. He just walked over and asked, what's the situation? Did you find the treasure? Fang Qishao pointed at the mountain and said, this is an ancient sword sect, a sword testing ground of the world's sword sect. Of course, it's not the weapon, but the swordsmen themselves. There are sword puppets guarding it. In the past, when the world's sword sect was still around, as long as a swordsman passed the sword puppet trial, he would be able to obtain a treasure guarded by the sword puppet. With it, he would have the qualification to go down the mountain to roam the world, and that treasure is your trump card. These things are all recorded in the ancient books of our Sword King's city. This is one of the many trial grounds of the world's sword sect. There are 3 sword puppets on it that are intact, and there must be something in their bodies. Previously, we didn't have enough people, but now we do. Since they couldn't beat Zhang Chengzhen and the others in a 2-on-2 fight, Fang Qishao didn't have anything to be embarrassed about now. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, the 2 of you go kill the sword puppets and get the treasure. I'll block them. Fang Qishao was stunned, and the way he looked at Chu Xiu changed. Brother, why are you so arrogant now? That's Zhang Chengzhen and Zhong Xian, not some Tom, Dick, and Harry. But seeing Chu Xiu's serious face, Fang Qishao didn't say much. He directly pulled Lu Fengxian and went to kill the sword puppets. Chu Xiu wasn't a person who liked to joke, especially on this occasion. He shouldn't be joking. But now that Chu Xiu said so, it meant that he had a certain degree of certainty to do so. Zhang Chengzhen glanced at Chu Xiu with a slightly surprised gaze. You don't think that after stepping into the real pellet state, only you, Chu Xiu, have improved, and we are all standing still? Chu Xiu shook his head and said, of course not, but I have confidence in myself. Zhang Chengzhen smiled and said, coincidentally, I am also very confident in myself. As soon as he spoke, before Zhang Chengzhen made a move, Zhong Xian had already blasted out a punch. The Buddha's power was mighty and shook the world. For people like Zhong Xian, his thinking was very simple. If you want to fight, then fight. He didn't care about being besieged. Moreover, recently in the Great Light Temple, he had more contact with Su Du after the 2 of them joined forces to kill Yuan Tianfang last time. Su Du was extremely respectful of Chu Xiu. This even made Zhong Xian, who had no intention of winning, want to see how strong Chu Xiu was now. Zhang Chengzhen squinted his eyes, and he didn't make a move immediately. Instead, he wanted Zhong Xian to see how strong Chu Xiu was. Chu Xiu had his pride, and Zhang Chengzhen also had his pride. In the past, in the Longhu list, Zhang Chengzhen dominated the Longhu list for more than 10 years. In the entire younger generation, only Zhong Xian could compete with him. Although there was an additional Chu Xiu in the later stage, he still suppressed so many people. He was the first to step into the real pellet state, and he even condensed the Thunder Golden Core. But for a period of time, the Taoist master's mansion was closed, and he rarely made a move. On the other hand, Chu Xiu killed the powerhouse of the real fire spirit refinement state and became famous in the underworld. So in this way, the entire underworld was also divided into two factions. One faction thought that among the younger generation, the most terrifying was still Chu Xiu, who already had the strength to kill the real fire spirit refinement state powerhouse. But there was another faction of people who thought that Chu Xiu could kill the real fire spirit refinement state because of tricks. In terms of real strength, little celestial master was better. These people were arguing there, but the people involved didn't care much. Whether it was for Chu Xiu or for Zhang Qingzhen, when did they ever care about other people's opinions? In their hearts, there was only one idea in common, that was, they would never be weaker than others. At this time, in the field, Chu Xiu had already fought with Zhong Xian. Both of them walked the path of incomparably violent fighting style, directly using brute force to kill, opening and closing with brute force. When Zhong Xian fought with Chu Xiu in the past, he was already weaker than Chu Xiu. But since the last time he stepped into the martial Dao Grand Master realm, he began to return to the Great Light Temple to train hard, and Su Xi, Su Yun, and Su Du had taken turns to guide him. This kind of treatment was not available to ordinary Great Light Temple disciples. Especially Su Du, although this person didn't seem very reliable, his understanding of martial arts was unique, which benefited Zhong Xian a lot. At this time, when Zhong Xian attacked, endless Buddha's light appeared behind him, among which were the prison-guarding Wisdom King, the immovable Wisdom King, and dozens of Wisdom King phantoms hovered behind him. As Zhong Xian's palm fell, the Wisdom King was furious, slaying evil and subduing demons. Zhong Xian's move even had the scene of thousands of gods and Buddhas merging into one when Su Du faced Yuan Tianfang in the past. The only difference was that Zhong Xian only cultivated the power of the immovable Wisdom King. In an instant, endless blood light emerged in Chu Xiu's eyes. On the heavenly demon dance, blood qi and demonic qi surged. As the saber slashed down, endless twisted bloodlines extended to the heavenly demon dance. This saber seemed to have flesh and blood, as well as a soul. As the blood mist and demonic qi surged, it had already slashed toward Zhong Xian's Wisdom King seal. Chapter 8:18. As the martial art that Lu Jianghu was most proud of, the demonic blood technique of the blood god was not as simple as the strengthened version of the demonic blood technique. The main use of the demonic blood technique was to guide the opponent's qi and blood in battle and devour the opponent's qi and blood to cultivate. It could only be said to be a quick technique. However, the effect of the demonic blood technique was not on the demon, but on the spirit, which was the use of the power of qi and blood. The power of qi and blood was the foundation of a martial artist, and it was the source of all divine forms. As Chu Xiu's saber slashed down, Chu Xiu's power of qi and blood extended into the demonic dance. In Chu Xiu's perception, the demonic dance seemed to have truly fused with Chu Xiu as one. The majestic power of qi and blood exploded, and the Wisdom King phantoms shattered one after another. A violent rumbling sound even attracted the attention of Fang Qi Shao and Lu Fengxian, who were fighting with the sword puppets above. Fang Qi Shao murmured, "One with the saber? That can't be. Even Chu Xiu's martial arts can achieve one with the saber." When a martial artist's compatibility with the weapon reached a certain level, such a change would occur, and the power would become even stronger. For example, the sword cultivators of the 5 major sword sects, such as Sword King City, loved the sword as much as their lives. What they pursued was the realm of one with the sword. It was not just in terms of philosophy, but the unity of the primordial spirit and the body. As long as the sword existed, the person existed. If the sword was destroyed, the person would die. Take the Windcloud Sword Tomb for example. After the experts of the Windcloud Sword Tomb died, their sword spirits also died and were buried together with them. Fang Qi believed that others could reach this realm, but how could someone like Chu Xiu, who had a complicated martial art, cultivate the saber Dao to this level? It was not fair. At this moment, in the battlefield, after Chu Xiu gained the upper hand with a single slash, strands of blood threads bloomed around him, and there was even a bloody mist that enveloped his entire body. With every slash, the bloody mist would become denser. In the end, it actually directly enveloped Chu Xiu's entire body, and the baleful blood energy ceaselessly corroded the Buddhist light. Zhongxian's eyes were shrouded in Buddhist light. Behind him, the alchemist glazed light king's Buddha image shone brightly, releasing spots of silver-white Buddhist light. He wanted to break through the cover of the blood mist, but it was to no avail. It was actually very easy to deal with a martial artist like Zhongxian, but it was also very difficult. To put it simply, as long as one's strength and foundation were superior to his opponent's, then there was no need to consider any changes at all. One could directly confront his opponent head-on and defeat him. But the difficult thing was, who among martial artists of the same level could guarantee that their strength and foundation could compare to Zhongxian's? Unfortunately, Chu Xiu was one of them. Seeing that Zhongxian had been forced to the extreme, Zhang Qingzhen finally made a move. Lightning flashed, and the Five Thunders true technique was cast. As the lightning fell, the blood mist was smashed by the lightning in an instant. Zhang Qingzhen's body was shining with lightning. With a wave of his hand, Divine Firmament Heavenly Thunder, Purple Heaven Divine Thunder, Yin Extreme Yang Thunder and so on were cast out from his hands. Half of the mountainside was instantly shrouded by lightning. As soon as Zhang Qingzhen made a move, even Chu Xiu's face was a little moved. Even Fang Qixiao's face above was a little ugly. The reason was very simple. When Zhang Qingzhen fought with him just now, he didn't even use 70% of his strength, and he was still struggling to resist. This was a bit of a blow to him. For nearly a year in the Daoist Master Mansion, Zhang Qingzhen rarely appeared in the eyes of the people of the martial arts world. At this time, it was the first time he used his full strength after stepping into the real pellet state. This power was simply terrifying. Chu Xiu waved one hand and boundless blood-colored shadows condensed out from his body. Some of them surged with sword qis, some of them formed Buddhist seals, and some of them unleashed blood-colored lightning techniques. All of them attacked Zhang Qingzhen. Countless martial arts changed, which made Zhang Qingzhen frown. Because one of the blood shadows cast the thunder of his Daoist Master Mansion. Although the thunder was basically cast by blood qi, Zhang Qingzhen could see at a glance that it was definitely the unique application of Daoist Master Mansion's thunder. Zhang Qingzhen's left hand shone with black yin thunder, and his right hand shone with hot yang thunder. Thunder was yang, and thunder was yin. Thunder was originally a powerful martial arts evolved from the power of yin and yang of Taoism. As the power of yin and yang in Zhang Qingzhen's hands merged, in an instant, the thunder flashed in mid-air, and the boundless thunderclouds of dozens of miles completely shrouded the mountainside. There was a loud bang, and countless thunderbolts fell like thunder snakes dancing wildly. It was extremely terrifying. At this moment, Zhongxian, who had been suppressed by Chu Xiu, formed a complicated Buddha gesture in his hand, and a tiny golden light bloomed from his palm. That golden light evolved into the infinite Buddhist kingdom, but it was not Buddha who suppressed the entire Buddhist kingdom, but a hell-guarding wisdom king. The Buddhist Dharma is boundless. In an instant, the Buddhist kingdom directly broke through the boundless blood mist and shrouded Chu Xiu. Whether it was Zhang Qingzhen or Zhongxian, they once stood at the peak of the younger generation of the martial arts world. Although the momentum they created during this period of time was not as strong as Chu Xiu's, it did not mean that they were weaker than Chu Xiu. The two of them attacked at the same time, and even Fang Qixiao murmured, F***ck. Brother Chu seems to have gone too far this time. Brother Lu, should we go and save him? Lu Fengxian looked down and shook his head. There's no need. Brother Chu's potential is stronger than you think. During this period of time, Lu Fengxian had been staying by Chu Xiu's side, and he had seen how strong Chu Xiu's strength was. Even an existence like Yuan Tianfang was defeated by Chu Xiu. Zhang Qingzhen and Zhong Xian were strong, and at least Lu Fengxian was not a match for them. But that did not mean that Chu Xiu was not a match for them. Those who had been around Chu Xiu for a long time would always have a subconscious illusion that no matter when or what kind of trouble they encountered, as long as Chu Xiu was there, he could solve it. This was not just trust, but also the confidence that Chu Xiu's near-undefeated record had given them for such a long time. At this time, the pressure on Chu Xiu had reached its peak. Zhong Xian and Zhang Qingzhen, these two were dragons and phoenixes among men. They were both at the peak of the younger generation, and their strength was unfathomable. At this time, when the two of them attacked with all their strength, the pressure on Chu Xiu was even greater than when he faced Fang Jinwu. So at this moment, Chu Xiu didn't care that his strength had not recovered to its peak. A mysterious aura spread out from the demonic dance. In an instant, the world was frozen. The demonic blade slashed out as if the world was torn apart like a painting scroll. Ethereal mortal slash. This extreme demonic blade slashed through the immeasurable Buddha kingdom, and it also slashed through the thunderclouds in the sky. It even left a huge and hideous blade mark of thousands of meters on the entire mountainside. It looked extremely horrifying. At this moment, not far from the mountainside where Chu Xiu and the others fought, some martial artists of various sects had already gathered. They were all watching the battle. Seeing the battle between Chu Xiu and the others, this group of people could be said to be taking a deep breath. They were also at the real pellet state, but when they saw that a junior like Chu Xiu could show such strength, they all had a feeling that they had lived in a dog's stomach all these years. What shocked them the most was that Chu Xiu was able to block the offensive of Zhang Qingzhen and Zhong Xian 1 versus 2. I'm afraid that the position of the top young generation will really change hands in the future. But at this time, Chu Xiu was not feeling well either. For the ethereal mortal slash, Chu Xiu would consume a lot of his energy to execute a slash. If he executed another slash, he would probably be drained again. Hey, you two haven't taken down that sword puppet yet? I can't hold on any longer. Chu Xiu shouted at the top of the mountain. When Lu Fengxian heard this, she immediately began to attack the sword puppet with all her strength. Fang Qishao curled his lips and said, "Don't rush me, this is a puppet specially made by the sword sect in the past to test their disciples. It's different from the stuff made by the Xianwu sect. Damn, this thing is cheating. The material of this puppet can even absorb true qi. If you come up, you won't be able to deal with it in a short time." Although he said so, Fang Qishao still seized the time and attacked the sword puppet. Just when Zhang Qingzhen and Zhong Xian wanted to continue to attack, a figure jumped up from below and shouted, "Chu Xiu! I'll fight you." The figure that suddenly appeared turned out to be Yi Tianxia. At this time, he was holding the blood dragon spear with a faint excitement on his face. The most important thing was that his strength had reached the real pellet state. It had only been more than a day. Even if Yi Tianxia's cultivation had reached the required level, he didn't need to cultivate behind closed doors to stabilize his cultivation after breaking through to the real pellet state. Yi Tianxia must have obtained some benefits in the secret realm. He could be said to be the luckiest group. But seeing Yi Tianxia's attack at this time, Zhang Qingzhen and Zhong Xian both frowned, and their eyes flashed with a hint of disgust. They knew what Yi Tianxia was planning. It was nothing more than seeing that Chu Xiu was a little exhausted at this time, so he wanted to take the opportunity to take advantage. They didn't care about reputation, but Yi Tianxia cared about reputation the most since he stepped into the underworld. At this moment, Chu Xiu had just fought fiercely with Zhang Qingzhen and Zhong Xian. He was obviously exhausted, and his strength had been greatly weakened at this time. If Yi Tianxia attacked Chu Xiu at this time, once he won, although the people in the underworld wouldn't be stupid enough to think that Yi Tianxia was stronger than Chu Xiu, Zhang Chengzhen, and Zhong Xian, at least he could ride on the popularity of the three of them to increase his reputation in the underworld. This kind of method wasn't glorious, and it seemed a bit despicable, at least for Zhang Chengzhen and Zhong Xian. Although they didn't dare to say that they were honorable, they disdained to use this way to gain reputation, so the moment Yi Tianxia made his move, they stopped at the same time. Chu Xiu suddenly sneered. This Yi Tianxia must be crazy to become famous. He even dared to use me as a stepping stone. Did he just step into the real pellet state, and he became arrogant? Boundless blood qi converged, and in an instant, the blood-colored demonic qi poured down like a long river. Indistinctly, the cries of hungry ghosts could be heard. Yi Tianxia, who just looked brave and rushed forward with a spear, didn't stay for a second, and he was directly slashed away by Chu Xiu's saber. Chapter 8:19. Chu Xiu was right. Yi Tianxia was just a little arrogant. Of course, this was also thanks to Chu Xiu. Although Chu Xiu had almost never had a head-on conflict with Yi Tianxia during this period of time, Yi Tianxia was extremely aggrieved because of Chu Xiu. In the previous war between the moon-worshipping cult and the demons, Yi Tianxia came to help the moon-worshipping cult on behalf of the evil extreme sect, but he was ridiculed by the moon-worshipping cult's holy maiden for not contributing as much as an outsider Chu Xiu. Then, in the floating snow city incident in the extreme north, he was also a famous figure on the Longhu list, but he was defeated by Bai Xiaotian, who had just stepped into the real pellet state. He was just about to find someone to take revenge, but Yan Lubing was easily defeated by Chu Xiu. After being aggrieved for so long, Yi Tianxia's luck was not bad. As soon as he entered the secret realm, he got a chance that allowed him to successfully step into the real pellet state. And because he cultivated the Blood Flood Dragon Heart Sutra, which was a vicious beast technique, he didn't need to rest behind closed doors after stepping into the real pellet state like most martial artists. At this time, seeing Chu Xiu fighting fiercely with Zhang Chengzhen and Zhong Xian, he really didn't dare to come up under normal circumstances. But now Chu Xiu was obviously a little exhausted. If he didn't make a move now, when would he? Yi Tianxia's calculation was quite good, but unfortunately, he still overestimated himself, or underestimated Chu Xiu. The moment Chu Xiu slashed out with his saber, Yi Tianxia immediately felt an irresistible force coming towards him. The force was so strong that even if he tried his best to resist, he was still blown away by the slash. If it weren't for the fact that he cultivated the Blood Flood Dragon Heart Sutra, which made his physical body extremely strong, maybe he would be seriously injured under that slash. The others around also looked at Yi Tianxia with a hint of ridicule in their eyes. Among the younger generation, there were obviously several levels of strength. Chu Xiu, Zhang Chengzhen, and Zhong Xian were undoubtedly in the first class. Yi Tianxia was not even at the second level, but he still wanted to challenge Chu Xiu. This was purely asking for trouble. But at this time, Fang Qi Shao, who was fighting the sword puppet above, suddenly shouted, F***CK. What's this? As his voice fell, a dazzling sword light rose from above. The cold light shone, and the sword energy spread out for hundreds of miles. At this moment, everyone's attention was attracted. On the mountain peak, there was a fragment of a sword puppet under Fang Qi Shao's feet. Clearly, the sword puppet had been destroyed by Fang Qi Shao. However, there was a long sword floating in midair, surrounded by piercingly cold sword qi. The long sword seemed to be made of bronze, exuding a simple and desolate feeling. However, the edge of the sword was scarlet red like blood rust, yet it was also red like fire, and it emitted an extremely piercingly cold killing intent. Seeing the appearance of the sword, Fang Qi Shao was the first to react and directly rushed toward the long sword. However, before he could reach it, he was blown away by the powerful sword intent. At this moment, the others also reacted and shouted, "It's slaying Red Dragon." Slaying Red Dragon, ranked 7th in the world-famous sword manual. This was a divine weapon that only existed in legends. It was said that in ancient times, there was a red dragon, ferocious beast that caused trouble. Many heroes wanted to kill it, but they were all swallowed into the belly of the beast. A swordsmithing master's wife and daughter had also accidentally died in the mouth of the red dragon. So, in a rage, he used his own chi and blood to forge a sword and gave it to a good friend so that the friend could use it to kill the red dragon. When the sword was forged, the swordsmithing master also died due to the exhaustion of his chi and blood. After the swordsmithing master's good friend used the sword to kill the red dragon, he buried it together with the swordsmithing master and disappeared. Everyone thought that this was just a legend, but they did not expect that this divine weapon that only existed in legends would really appear before their eyes today. At this moment, Fang Qi was so regretful that even his intestines were green. If he had known that there was a divine sword ranked in the top 10 of the world-famous sword manual in the world-famous sword manual, he would have reserved some strength and not destroyed the sword puppet completely. What the hell was the World Sword Sect doing? Wasn't this a sword puppet for disciples to use for training? Even if they wanted to give the trial taker some life-saving trump cards, there was no need to throw out such a divine weapon. Was this a trump card or a big gift bag? When the slaying red dragon appeared, the eyes of the martial artists who were watching earlier lit up, and they directly rushed toward the mountain peak. Previously, they had only been watching because they did not see anything good. It was equivalent to watching a show, and they did not want to interfere with the competition between the younger generation. But now that a divine weapon had appeared, they could not care less about the younger generation. Even martial artists who did not use swords could not resist the temptation of the 7th-ranked divine sword in the world-famous sword manual. The crowd swarmed up, and Fang Qi and Lu Fengxian could not resist at all. However, the sharpness of the swordsmanship on the slaying red dragon shone brightly for a moment, and the surrounding people could not get their hands on it for a while. Divine weapons had spirits, and it was not so easy to become the master of a divine weapon. Just when Chu Xiu wanted to go up and fight for the slaying red dragon, an angry shout with hatred suddenly came, "Chu Xiu!" Chu Xiu turned around and saw two people climbing up the mountain. One of them had an extremely pale face, to the extent that there was no blood. It was Duan Tianlang, who had used a secret method to escape from Chu Xiu. Now, Duan Tianlang actually had the courage to appear in front of him because Bu Tiannan was standing beside him. Looking at Chu Xiu, Bu Tiannan sneered and said, "Boy, you really dared to attack. This is the 5 dragon heads of my Blue Dragon Society. What did I say? If you kill him, I will kill you." Chu Xiu frowned. Bu Tiannan, this madman, was actually here. This was a bit troublesome. What he hated the most was dealing with a madman like Bu Tiannan, because Bu Tiannan had no scruples at all. However, at this moment, Chu Xiu suddenly saw something and immediately retreated. Bu Tiannan sneered and said, "Those old fellows from your Yinma clan are here? Apart from Elder Wei, I really don't care about those useless chickens and dogs." The person Chu Xiu found was not someone from the Yinma clan, but the Jiangnan king, of Sword King City, Du Guli. Seeing Chu Xiu running in his direction, Du Guli frowned. He thought that Chu Xiu wanted to use his relationship with Fang Qi to get him to save him. Although Sword King City was not an extreme righteous sect like the Great Light Temple, they would still draw a clear line between them and the demonic path. It was fine that 7th young Master Fang and Chu Xiu had an ambiguous relationship, and Du Guli couldn't care less about it. However, Chu Xiu was delusional if he wanted to save him. Just as Du Guli was about to refuse, Chu Xiu suddenly said, "Senior Du Gu, how about we make a deal? You help me block Bu Tiannan, and I will help Brother Fang fight for the slaying Scarlet Dragon. Lu Fengxian and Brother Lu will also help Brother Fang. You know my friendship with Brother Fang, and Brother Lu and I are not sword users. As long as you agree, the seventh divine sword in the world-famous sword manual will belong to Fang Qishao. Du Guli was stunned. He thought that Chu Xiu was here to ask for help, but he did not expect Chu Xiu to first talk about a deal. However, the temptation of the slaying Scarlet Dragon, which was ranked 7th in the world-famous sword manual, was too great. It was so great that he could completely ignore Chu Xiu's identity. Thus, Du Guli only thought about it for a few seconds before agreeing, okay. With that, Du Guli directly blocked Bu Tiannan's path. Fang Qishao, who was fighting for the slaying Scarlet Dragon with a group of warriors, couldn't help but slap his head. His martial granduncle was an honest person, but he was tricked by Chu Xiu just like that. He still didn't realize that Bu Tiannan's first target was Chu Xiu, and the slaying Scarlet Dragon came second. Thus, even if Du Guli didn't help Chu Xiu stop Bu Tiannan, he could still fight for the slaying Scarlet Dragon first. However, there were only him and Bu Tiannan at the true fire spirit refinement realm, so he subconsciously regarded Bu Tiannan as the biggest threat. Moreover, Chu Xiu secretly changed his mind and regarded himself as the key to fighting for the slaying Scarlet Dragon. Du Guli didn't have time to react and subconsciously agreed. Of course, even if Fang Qishao saw through him, he wouldn't expose him. He even wanted to ask his martial granduncle to help Chu Xiu. Seeing Du Guli blocking in front of him, Bu Tiannan raised his eyebrows and said, "Old Du Gu, since when did your Sword King city become so nosy? Are you sure you dare to attack me?" Du Guli was definitely considered a senior among the many true fire spirit refinement realm warriors. At the same time, he had a fiery temper, so he immediately exploded when he heard this. "Bu Tiannan, other people might be afraid of your Blue Dragon Society, but do you think my Sword King city is afraid of you? If you really have the ability, why don't you set up a branch of the Blue Dragon Society in the western regions?" Bu Tiannan revealed a grim smile. As soon as his voice fell, his figure had completely turned into a cyan streamer. His figure was like a soaring dragon. As his claw fell down, the cyan gang chi turned into a dragon claw with a loud bang. The ferocious killing intent was integrated into that claw, which made the surrounding world instantly freeze. Du Guli coldly snorted and used the sky-burning sword art. The sky was filled with sword shadows burning with scorching flames. One hot and one cold, the two forces collided and intersected, causing a shockwave that was enough to make people instantly raise their eyebrows. The two only exchanged one move, and Du Guli let out a muffled groan. His eyes flashed with a look of disbelief. Bu Tiannan's strength was truly terrifying to this extent. In the past, Du Guli was defeated by Eastern Emperor Tai of the moon-worshipping sect. Among all the true fire spirit refinement realm warriors in the Jianghu, Eastern Emperor Tai was definitely the strongest. Now that he was facing Bu Tiannan, Du Guli actually felt like he was facing Eastern Emperor Tai. Even if Bu Tiannan's strength was not as strong as Eastern Emperor Tai's, it was probably not that far off. It seemed like he was at a disadvantage when he agreed to Chu Xiu's conditions. However, now was not the time for Du Guli to go back on his words. Once Bu Tiannan started fighting, he was simply like a madman. His killing intent was overflowing, and he didn't care about probing and so on. He directly used his full strength, and after a few moves, he had already suppressed Du Guli to the point where he couldn't breathe. Chapter 820. Du Guli was struggling to resist Bu Tiannan while Chu Xiu was helping Fang Qishao fight for the Red Dragon Slayer. The chaotic battle was exactly what Chu Xiu was best at. He used the blood shadow technique to the extreme, and countless blood shadows flew around him. Even Zhang Chengzhen and Zhong Xian were not as lethal as Chu Xiu. As seventh young master Fang charged through the crowd, he complained to Zhang Chengzhen, "I say, brother Zhang, no matter what, you and I are old acquaintances. It wasn't easy for me to get this godly sword. Can't you just let me have it once?" You already have evil slaying, so why do you still want to fight with me for this sword? How about giving me some face? Zhang Qingzhen's treatment could be said to be the best among the younger generation of martial artists. From the moment he was born, as long as he didn't die young, he would be the future heir of the Celestial Master Mansion. From then on, the divine sword in the Celestial Master Mansion, which was ranked 10th in the famous sword book, was sealed for Zhang Qingzhen's use in the future. Compared to Zhang Qingzhen's treatment, Fang Qixiao and Chu Xiu were basically raised by a stepmother. However, Zhang Qingzhen didn't answer Fang Qixiao at this time. Instead, he casually waved his hand, and endless lightning bolts fell down, which was considered as an answer to Fang Qixiao. At this time, Chu Xiu suddenly sent a voice transmission to Fang Qixiao, "Stop fooling around. Watch my movements later, you must keep up with me. Since your ancestor helped me stop Wutian Nan, I will give you a big gift." Fang Qixiao was stunned and looked at Chu Xiu in surprise. With so many people fighting for the Red Dragon Slayer, how could Chu Xiu be so confident? However, before Fang Qixiao could think further, Chu Xiu had already made his move. Surging and pure devil qi condensed behind Chu Xiu, and a pair of arms made of devil qi appeared behind Chu Xiu. As Chu Xiu's hands formed a seal, a terrifying aura condensed in Chu Xiu's hands, and a ferocious demonic longbow materialized. With one hand holding the bow and the other holding the bowstring, the Triple City Annihilation arrow shot out. The arrow that Chu Xiu shot with almost all of his strength was not aimed at Zhang Qingzhen, Zhong Xian, or anyone else. Instead, it was shot directly at the Scarlet Dragon Slayer. Everywhere it passed, everything was annihilated. The powerful energy caused everyone's hearts to tremble, and they couldn't help but avoid it. When Chu Xiu shot the arrow, Fang Qixiao understood what Chu Xiu meant. The Triple City Annihilation arrow shot out, and wherever it passed, a vacuum was formed. The essence of the world was annihilated, and even the warriors in its path were forced to retreat. Fang Qixiao's figure directly turned into a sword light, and he followed behind the Triple City Annihilation arrow at the fastest speed possible. The arrow seemed to be opening the way for him, and he was unimpeded along the way. Even the powerful sword qi of the Scarlet Dragon Slayer began to collapse under Chu Xiu's arrow. The sword spirit even let out a sorrowful cry, and there was a hint of disbelief in its sorrowful cry. A sword spirit at the level of the Scarlet Dragon Slayer was already quite intelligent, and it even had the right to choose its master. It was just like Lu Fengxian's unparalleled divine weapon. Before Lu Fengxian obtained LV Wenho's primordial spirit fragment, she couldn't get close to the unparalleled divine weapon at all. Only when it fused with LV Wenho's primordial spirit fragment would the unparalleled divine weapon willingly let Lu Fengxian control it. Now, the Scarlet Dragon Slayer was in the same situation. After appearing in the world, the Scarlet Dragon Slayer also wanted to choose a master who was worthy of it. The existence that forged it was a top swordsmithing master in ancient times, and the person who used it was also a hero with the strength of the Scarlet Dragon Slayer. Now, if someone wanted to own this divine sword that had been stained with the blood of the Scarlet Dragon, ordinary people wouldn't be qualified. Therefore, in the Scarlet Dragon Slayer's opinion, the surrounding warriors were like breeding insects, letting them kill each other first. Only the person who killed the last one would be qualified to control it. In the end, who would have thought that there would be someone who didn't play by the rules? Instead of killing others, he attacked it. Aren't you afraid of accidentally hurting this divine sword? Chu Xiu didn't expect a sword spirit to have so many inner thoughts. Of course, it didn't matter even if he knew. Regardless of whether it was a sword or any other weapon, only a weapon held in the hands of a warrior was a true weapon. Weapons were for use, not for worship. He wasn't a member of the hidden Sword Mountain Manor, so he wouldn't get used to this bad habit. Seeing this, Zhang Qingzhen had already unsheathed the evil-slaying sword in his hand. In that instant, a piercingly cold sword light flashed, and lightning flashed. The sword light was like thunder from the 9 heavens, and it slashed 7 times in a row, almost cutting off all of Fang Qixiao's paths forward. In the past, the power of Dugu Weiwei's triple city annihilation arrow could be said to be renowned throughout the entire pugilistic world. Perhaps because it was too long ago, the other sects didn't remember, but the elderly heavenly master had told Zhang Qingzhen about the terrifying feat of Dugu Weiwei's arrow piercing through the Iron Emperor castle in the past. Thus, Zhang Qingzhen didn't try to intercept that arrow. He only intercepted Fang Qixiao. However, to his surprise, Fang Qixiao's expression was one of rare seriousness. Specks of starlight shone from the shocking centipede sword in his hand, and he slashed out 7 times. The 7 sword lights didn't look very impressive, but it was as if they had transcended time and space, and they suddenly collided with Zhang Qingzhen's 7 sword lights. In that instant, the specks of starlight disappeared into thin air, as if they had never existed. A hint of surprise finally appeared on Zhang Qingzhen's calm face. After a moment, a smile appeared on his face, and he murmured, "I've underestimated you." Zhang Qingzhen had failed. He hadn't failed at Chu Xiu's hands, but he had failed at Fang Qixiao's hands. He had made a huge mistake, he had underestimated his opponent. In fact, given Fang Qixiao's character, anyone would underestimate him. Even those who didn't know him well wouldn't be able to imagine that this fellow was the rumored top swordsman of the younger generation, Fang Qixiao. He was a disgrace to swordsmanship. Although Zhang Qingzhen wasn't like others who believed that a person's character represented a person's strength, he had subconsciously underestimated Fang Qixiao. That was why he hadn't even used his full strength when he fought with Fang Qixiao earlier. It was only when Chu Xiu had arrived that he had used his full strength. Now, Zhang Qingzhen realized that he was wrong. Fang Qixiao's understanding of the karma swordsmanship had already involved time and space, and his opponent's 7 sword lights had directly intercepted the source of his 7 sword lights. He had intercepted his attack from the source. He hadn't used his full strength before, but Fang Qixiao had used his full strength. Zhang Qingzhen thought about it carefully. In all these years, there had been people who had seen him, Zhang Qingzhen, fight with his full strength, and had also seen Chu Xiu fight with his life on the line. However, when had anyone ever seen 7th young master Fang use his full strength? It wasn't scary to pretend to be a pig to eat a tiger. What was scary was that someone was originally a tiger but was born with a pig's skin. Not having to pretend to be a tiger was already the best disguise. Boom! The triple city annihilation arrow blasted on the slain crimson dragon, and countless sword auras dissipated. Even the sword light on the slain crimson dragon dimmed a little. Fang Qixiao followed closely behind and grasped the hilt of the sword. The long sword suddenly erupted with an extreme resistance, but Fang Qixiao directly poured powerful sword auras into it, and it was completely absorbed. After obtaining the slain crimson dragon, Fang Qixiao heaved a sigh of relief. However, he still complained to Chu Xiu, "Hey, brother Chu, can you be a little more careful? This is the 7th divine sword in the famous sword manual. Is this how you treat a divine sword?" Chu Xiu rolled his eyes and lightly said, "You should be content. It's already good enough to get the sword. Why do you have so many demands?" Dugu Li, who was fighting fiercely with Bu Tiannan, or more accurately, being suppressed by Bu Tiannan, immediately heaved a sigh of relief. It was not in vain for him to resist Bu Tiannan for so long for Chu Xiu. The slain crimson dragon finally fell into the hands of Sword King City. However, at this time, Dugu Li suddenly realized something. Why did he help Chu Xiu resist Dugu Li? Wouldn't it be the same if he ignored Chu Xiu and obtained the slain crimson dragon himself? However, before Dugu Li could say anything, a violent shaking sound came from the top of the mountain. A weak formation light bloomed, but it was immediately extinguished. A large area of the mountain peak cracked open, revealing a passage. There were faint traces of an inscribed formation in it. Fang Qixiao was the closest to the place. In the next moment, everyone realized what was going on. The mountain had been hollowed out, and there was another relic inside. However, this relic was too well hidden. It was so well hidden that no one realized that there was something else inside even after standing there for a long time. Just now, when Chu Xiu attacked the slaying Crimson Dragon with the triple annihilation arrow, it collided with the sword energy on the slaying Crimson Dragon. The powerful shockwave should have completely destroyed the previously damaged formation, which caused the passage inside to be exposed. Fang Qishao thought about it and took 2 steps back. He didn't want to seize the initiative. He was actually a very cautious person. If he encountered something unknown, he would rather let others go ahead. If he couldn't get the best things himself, he would rather not explore the way ahead. At that moment, several auras came from the surroundings. More than 10 martial artists went up the mountain one after another. When the slaying Crimson Dragon was unsheathed, the sword light shot straight into the sky. It could be seen from hundreds of miles away, and it had already attracted a group of martial artists. Of course, they came a little too late. The divine sword already had an owner. Most of the people who went up the mountain were martial Dao masters. There were 3 people at the true fire spirit refinement realm, and one of them was Wei Shuya. Chu Xiu also breathed a sigh of relief and walked toward Wei Shuya. There were 2 people left. One of them was Shen Baochen from the Sword Hut, and the other was the general of the Northern Yen East Mountain Army, Guangtu Beigong Bailey. Beigong Bailey was a middle-aged man in a white Confucian robe. He looked gentle, but no one would have guessed that hundreds of thousands of people had died in the hands of this general. Moreover, Chu Xiu also noticed that Sun Qili and Sun Qifan from the Sun family of River East were among the people who came. Chu Xiu couldn't help but glance at the 2 of them with a hint of gloominess. He had noticed that when Kuang Xieyue was chasing after him, these people were all by his side. They were obviously leading the way. Chapter 821. When Wei Shuya saw Chu Xiu, he came over and asked, "Why did you use up all your strength again? It's not a good thing to do in the secret territory. In a mystic realm like this, where one could encounter all sorts of enemies and dangers, it was very dangerous to exhaust all of one's energy." Wei Shuya's words were based on experience. Chu Xiu smiled bitterly and said, "I didn't want to, but I met Butiannan first. If I don't think of a way, that madman will really kill me." Wei Shuya shook his head and said, "Did you provoke Kuang Xieyue?" Chu Xiu said, "I didn't provoke Kuang Xieyue this time. It was Kuang Xieyue who provoked me." "Elder Wei, did you see Kuang Xieyue?" Wei Shuya said, "I didn't see Kuang Xieyue, but Qin Chaoxian saw him earlier. He was looking for you like crazy. Did you seriously injure him?" Chu Xiu touched his nose and said, "I didn't seriously injure him. I could only say that I tricked him." Previously, Chu Xiu used a blood shadow to lure Kuang Xieyue away. When the blood shadow's power was exhausted, Kuang Xieyue would catch up with it. At that time, Kuang Xieyue would know that he was tricked. With Kuang Xieyue's character, he would definitely be furious after knowing that he was tricked. Chu Xiu was not surprised. Wei Shuya was speechless at this time. Chu Xiu's strength was really proportional to his ability to cause trouble. He had only been in there for a short period of time, but he had already provoked 2 experts in the true fire spirit refinement realm. Moreover, both of them were not the kind to be trifled with. "You will stay with me during this time. Don't run around anymore." The Ima clan's reputation was not small, but it did not mean that everyone had to care about their reputation. Chu Xiu nodded. In fact, he would have done the same even if Wei Shuya didn't say so. It seemed that he had attracted too much hatred during this time. He needed to keep a low profile. However, sometimes the situation did not allow Chu Xiu to keep a low profile. For the time being, no one went down the passageway at the bottom of the mountain peak. Instead, everyone gathered to the side to observe. The level of the martial artists who entered the ruins this time was relatively high. They were all martial Dao grandmasters who had reached the real pellet state. Even if some people were weaker, they still had rich experience in the martial world. They wouldn't be like some junior martial artists who were impatient and rushed forward when they saw the benefits, regardless of whether there was any danger. They were very calm. While Chu Xiu was recovering his consumed true qi, he also moved closer to the entrance of the passageway to observe. However, with just a glance, Chu Xiu slightly frowned, and the expressions of the others were almost the same. The passageway was a bottomless staircase that extended all the way down. The passageway was engraved with blood-colored patterns. Some of them looked like paintings, while others looked like words. What made one's heart palpitate the most was the aura coming from it. It was an aura that contained resentment, hatred, blood, slaughter, and various other negative emotions. It was even to the extent that it faintly aroused the evil in everyone's hearts, causing it to seem extremely evil. But the problem was that it wasn't strange for this aura to appear in other places, but it appeared here. What is this place? This mountain peak should be one of the branches of the world's sword sect in this space. It was used to train or teach disciples. There were also sword puppets specially left for the disciples to challenge and obtain the qualifications to travel in the martial world. The aura in this passageway was very inconsistent with the location of the world's sword sect. Chu Xiu felt that it was normal to appear in a demon's den. Everyone present looked at each other and stepped into the passageway. The people present might be cautious, or perhaps they were old and prudent, but they were not timid people. They didn't dare to make a move even though the opportunity was right in front of them. Looking at the surrounding stone walls, Chu Xiu suddenly felt that these words were a little familiar. There were some ancient people's words mixed within, just like what Chu Xiu had seen in the palace previously. However, they were a little different. Even Lu Jianghu, who was proficient in these words, couldn't understand them. It was as if these words were carved by someone in an extremely deranged state. The more one looked at them, the more chills they felt. Chu Xiu asked in a low voice, "What is written here? Why isn't it us? Unfair. 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 It's the same calamity. They are the ones going through the calamity. Why are we the ones going through the calamity? Revenge. Revenge. Revenge." Chu Xiu's low voice immediately attracted the attention of the others. Wei Shuya and Du Guli looked at Chu Xiu with slight astonishment. There were very few martial artists in the pugilistic world who understood the ancient people's words. Only some formation masters or divination masters who frequently came into contact with these things would understand a little. Some of the people present might have learned some of these words from ancient books. However, only Wei Shuya and Duguli could be considered to be familiar with them. After all, they were experienced people in the pugilistic world. They had more time and experience than the martial artists present. While they were proficient in martial arts, they had also read a lot of miscellaneous books. These ancient people's words were like that. However, a young man like Chu Xiu actually understood them. In particular, the impression that Chu Xiu gave people was that he was only good at killing and violence. It was unexpected that he was actually quite knowledgeable. The deeper they went, the more intense the bone-piercing cold and resentment became. Moreover, the passageway seemed to have no end. Everyone gradually felt that something was wrong. Even if the mountain was empty, everyone should be able to reach the bottom by now. However, the passageway seemed to have no end. At that moment, Wei Shuya suddenly said, "Wait." Everyone present subconsciously looked at him. Wei Shuya said in a low voice, "I'm afraid we have already fallen into an array formation." Duguli frowned and said, "Array formation? The only array formation above has already been destroyed. How can there be an array formation here?" Wei Shuya pointed at the words engraved on the surrounding walls and said, "These words are the ancient people's words. They carry the power to absorb the power of heaven and earth. Coupled with the overflowing resentment in this place, after tens of thousands of years, I'm afraid it has already formed a natural array formation. Its power is even more troublesome than an array formation that was set up by humans. At this point, Wei Shuya's brows furrowed tightly. If it was an array formation that was set up by humans, it would actually be easier to deal with. There were only two methods to break an array formation, the technical method and the brute force method. Those array formation masters, such as Black Marshal Gates Pu Yangyi, usually broke an array formation by breaking the array patterns. This way, the array formation itself would not be damaged and there would be no backlash. As for the brute force method, it was much simpler. One could directly destroy the array patterns with brute force. However, one would have to suffer the backlash of the array formation. But now, how to break an array formation that was naturally formed between heaven and earth? Even if an array formation grandmaster came, there was actually no good way. If it was not set up by humans, then there was no way to break it. This was a natural array that had been accumulated for tens of thousands of years. How could it be broken? Duguli sneered and said, "What heaven and earth array? I don't believe that there is an array in this world that can't be broken." As soon as his voice fell, Duguli waved his hand and boundless sword chi burst out. The fiery sword chi directly illuminated the boundless passage and burst out with a loud bang. Even the real pellet state martial artists hid far away. But after the sword chi burst out, the wall was still the wall. There was not even the slightest change. At this time, Bu Tiannan, who had been silent all this time, suddenly said, "Old Dugu, don't waste your energy. I'm afraid we are really trapped in an array," as Old Wei said. Moreover, this formation has already separated the space. We are no longer in the mountain, nor are we underground, but in a separate space. Unless your sword can cut the space, it will be useless even if you slash 10,000 times. Duguli glared at Butiannan, but he did admit that what Butiannan said made sense. Although this person was a temperamental madman, when Butiannan was not crazy, he was quite accurate in seeing things. At this time, Chu Xiu realized that Wei Shuya's reputation in the martial world was really quite high. Others, whether they were from the righteous path or the demonic path, as long as they didn't have a life-and-death feud with Wei Shuya, they would respectfully call him Old Wei. They called Old Wei not only because of Wei Shuya's seniority, but also because of his heroic deeds as the 5 great demons of the 9th Heaven Mountain. Although the 5 great demons of the 9th Heaven Mountain only existed for a short time before they were annihilated by the Righteous Path martial artists, even the Righteous Path martial artists who annihilated them had to admit that although their positions were different, these 5 people could be called heroes of the present age. Wei Shuya said solemnly, "You guys, now is not the time to quarrel. We are now trapped in such an array space. Although there is no danger for the time being trapped here and unable to get out is our biggest danger. If we are trapped here for one more day, we will gain nothing. We can only watch the people outside explore the ruins and gain benefits. Don't wait until the secret realm collapses. If we are still wandering around here, we will become a joke." Everyone present nodded, and their faces were a little ugly. What Wei Shuya said made sense. Being trapped in this place was already the biggest problem for them. Zhang Qingzhen said solemnly, "Old Wei, you are the oldest and the most experienced here. You should make the decision." Zhang Qingzhen's words had basically represented the attitude of other real pellet state martial artists. Let go of the differences between good and evil, let's work together to find a way out. Among them, the one who could represent the righteous path most was not Duguli or Shenbaochen, but Zhang Qingzhen from the Celestial Master Mansion. Wei Shuya nodded and said solemnly, "Everyone, this space is bottomless. It should be said that we have been going around in circles. It is useless to go on. If we want to break this array, we still have to solve the problem from the source. As for where the source is, it is actually the things engraved in the surrounding murals and the specious words. This is the trial place of the world's sword sections. Why is there such a resentful channel here? This is worth investigating. Chapter 8:22. The surrounding words and pictures were very messy. Even if they could recognize the words of the ancient people, they would not be able to gather them into a complete content. However, following Wei Shiya's words, the surrounding people turned around and studied the things written on it in detail. They really did find some clues. The words and pictures were not written by a single person. Instead, they were written by a group of people. There were slight differences in their handwriting. They arranged them according to the notes and understood some of the contents. They finally knew the reason why the resentment in this place was so strong. At the same time, when they read it, they felt chills running down their spines. According to what was written on it, the ancient calamity was about to arrive. The sword sect of the world had a way to pass the calamity. However, only a small portion of the people would be able to pass the calamity. It could be said that only 10% of the people in the sword sect of the world would be able to pass the calamity. The rest would be abandoned. As for how the 10% of people would be chosen, according to fairness, other than the sect leader who stood at the peak of the sect, the rest should be decided by drawing lots. That would be the fairest way. However, in reality, how many people in this world could be truly fair? The sword sect of the world could not do it. Hence, among the 10% of people, a portion of them were the mainstays of the sect. There was also a portion of them who were talented young disciples. They were the future seeds of the sword sect of the world. As for the last portion, they were not strong and they were not talented either. However, they were the disciples or their relatives of the elders of the sword sect of the world. As for the remaining people, it was very simple. They would be abandoned. However, even if they were to be abandoned, it would be very difficult to do. Because there were too many disciples left, and the 10% of his people wanted to take away everything in the world's sword sect. In order to prevent them from finding out, the person in charge of the world's sword sect of that generation made a rather vicious decision. The place that Chu Xiu and the rest found was called the Six Illusory Realms. It was one of the many spatial secret realms that were discovered by the people in the ancient times. Moreover, there were 5 other secret realms with similar environments. Hence, they were called the Six Illusory Realms. Under the trial grounds, the sword sect of the world had carved out a huge space and laid down a seal. After summoning the rest of the people under the pretext of a meeting, they tricked them into this place. Finally, they directly sealed the array formation, trapping all of them here to death. This move could be said to be quite vicious. Before the Great Calamity came, if these people did not die in the hands of the Great Calamity, it was very likely that they would die in their own hands. As for the last part of the message, it was somewhat unclear. After the people trapped here went crazy, the words they wrote also carried a hint of madness. There were words of revenge, blood sacrifice, and all sorts of malicious words. It was unknown what they were trying to express, or if they were simply cursing. After looking at these things, everyone present suddenly fell silent. To be honest, the impact of this matter was quite great. Even if it was them, they wouldn't dare to imagine what it would feel like to personally bury 90% of their sect's disciples. However, on the other hand, if they were in his shoes, they might not have done as well as the leader of the world's sword sect in the past. The martial Dao masters present were all from big sections. Even if they were not clan leaders, they were still the mainstays of their respective sections. They knew how complicated these things would be when a great calamity was about to befall them. The supreme experts of the sect would definitely have to leave. Without them, what would the sect rely on to support itself? Also, the disciples with great potential and the true backbone of the sect must be brought along. As for the disciples who were related to the sect, wouldn't the other experts resent them if they were to be left here? Hence, the ones to be sacrificed could only be the disciples who were not related to the sect and were not strong enough. If the leader of the World Sword sect in the past was soft-hearted and wanted to be fair, it would definitely cause the World Sword sect to experience an internal strife before they got through the great calamity. Moreover, the number of people left in the end might not even be 10% of the people that he had chosen. However, the leader of the World Sword sect made the decision to sacrifice 90% of the disciples with a wave of his hand. He was ruthless enough. However, even if everyone understood what was written, what use would it be? The disciples of the World Sword sect who were trapped here were probably all dead. Now, their resentment and death aura had combined with the words that they had written to form a formation. There was no solution to it at all. They wanted to take revenge. Could it be that they had to find the people of the World Sword sect in the past and let them kill them? The crowd was discussing in whispers. At that moment, Chu Xiu's eyes revealed a hint of surprise. He suddenly said to Lu Fengxian, who was next to him, "Brother Lu, what do you think about this? Do you think that the leader of the World Sword sect did the right thing or not?" Lu Fengxian was stunned. Then, he scoffed coldly and said, "Of course not. Sacrificing 90% of the people in exchange for the lives of 10%. Why? On what basis should the 90% of the people die?" The most infuriating thing is that among the 10% of people, there are some who are simply trash. Their strength and potential are not even comparable to the 90% of the people who were sacrificed. Just because they are related to the sect, they can live. It's really too unfair. At that moment, a cold light suddenly flashed across Chu Xiu's eyes. He formed a Buddhist seal with his hand and displayed the colorless sealing palm print. As the Buddhist light shone brightly, a mustard seed appeared in his palm and smashed towards Lu Fengxian's head. The ancient halberd in Lu Fengxian's hand abruptly swung out, blocking the colorless sealing palm. However, he was also blasted back a few steps. He roared furiously, "Chu Xiu! Are you crazy? Why did you hit me?" When the crowd saw this scene, they were dumbfounded. They could not figure out what was going on. They all knew about the relationship between Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian. The two of them had been good friends for many years. In fact, they had already known each other when Chu Xiu was still insignificant. Lu Fengxian had once dared to help Chu Xiu when he was besieged by the righteous Dao alliance. And Chu Xiu had barged into the Yunu Palace alone for Lu Fengxian and almost destroyed the entire Yunu Palace. Of course, the Yunu Palace's current situation was no different from being destroyed. These two were brothers who had been through life and death together. Why did they fall out now? Chu Xiu said coldly, "What kind of ghost are you? Speak, where is Brother Lu?" Lu Fengxian said angrily, "What are you talking about? I'm right here. Where else can I be?" Chu Xiu sneered and said, "Your acting is not bad. Unfortunately, no matter how good you are, you can only pretend to be a shell. There are some things that you can't pretend to be. Do you know how many flaws you have revealed?" Without waiting for Lu Fengxian to speak, Chu Xiu said directly, "You've always been by my side. I don't even know when Brother Lu was replaced by you. However, I had a feeling that Brother Lu, who had always been by my side, had suddenly disappeared. Of course, this feeling can't be real. It can't be considered evidence. That's why I asked you that question. Who is right and who is wrong? You're standing on the side of the 90% who were sacrificed. You think Brother Lu is a kind person and the answer is definitely the same. But you're wrong. Brother Lu doesn't think that this matter is wrong. But he won't stand on the side of the ruthless World Sword sect's leader. Because in Brother Lu's heart, there are many things that are not right or wrong. It's just a personal choice. If you choose right, then it's right. If you choose wrong, then it's wrong. This is the key reason why Brother Lu can be on the same side as me, a demon. At the same time, he has countless good friends in the pugilistic world. He only stands on his own side. He never stands on the side of others. Of course, this question is just a prelude. Even if you're wrong, I'll just be a little more suspicious. But later on, you'll make more and more mistakes. You can't imagine the friendship between Brother Lu and me. Even if I suddenly attack him, he won't be angry enough to call my name. He'll be worried if something happened to me. Of course, there's one last point. You can imitate many things. You can even imitate Brother Lu's aura perfectly. But you can't imitate his unparalleled weapon. Previously, when Brother Lu was fighting with Zhang Chengzhen and Zhong Xian, he had already used his unparalleled weapon. Now that he's in such a dangerous place, why would he keep his unparalleled weapon? As a result, the halberd in your hand is not the unparalleled weapon. Such a big loophole, do you think I'm blind and can't see it? As Chu Xiu said a series of words, the faces of everyone present suddenly changed. They stepped away from the surrounding people and looked at each other vigilantly. Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian had such a close relationship. Since he said so many doubtful points, it was almost certain that Lu Fengxian was replaced. Although Lu Fengxian was a younger generation martial artist, his strength was also considered upper-class among the many real pellet state martial artists present. Now that he was replaced, would there be someone among the people present who was also replaced? At this time, the face of Lu Fengxian on the opposite side suddenly began to change. His whole body began to melt like a wax figure. After the outer skin melted, there was a black mist-like thing floating in the air inside, leaving only two scarlet hideous eyes that were blooming with endless killing intent. You are right, I am indeed a ghost, but I am a malicious ghost who has been waiting for 10,000 years for revenge. We have waited for too long. What is right and what is wrong, we don't care so much. Those people owed us back then, we will get it back sooner or later. As its voice faded, the surrounding passageway disappeared, and what appeared before everyone's eyes was an incomparably pitch-black space. There were dense black mist-like malicious ghosts floating around them. They were also staring at them with scarlet eyes. The whole scene suddenly made people's hair stand up. Chapter 823. Being surrounded by a group of densely packed ghosts, everyone present suddenly felt a little uncomfortable in their hearts. Although it wasn't fear, they at least felt a little creepy. They were able to reach the real pellet state, and they had experienced a lot of bloody battles. However, they had killed people before, so how should they kill ghosts? Perhaps Zhang Chengzhen's thunder was more useful at this time? At this time, Shen Baochen, who had been silent all this while, suddenly said, "Don't play tricks there. If people can become ghosts after death, then this world would have been full of evil spirits. It's just a vicious spirit condensed from the resentment of thousands of people. If there was no formation of this natural array, how could you be born by chance? The natural array has no foundation, but you yourself are the eye of the array." Hearing this, the hot-tempered Du Guli immediately snorted coldly. A scorching sword aura swept out and directly slashed the ghost into pieces. At the same time, the scorching flames began to burning the densely packed ghosts that surrounded everyone. The entire pitch-black space was illuminated by the flames. At this time, Chu Xiu finally saw Lu Fengxian's figure. Lu Fengxian, who had disappeared, was actually sitting cross-legged behind those ghosts. However, his aura was weak at this moment, as if he was in a deep sleep. There was also a blood-colored array pattern beneath his feet. Only this array pattern seemed to have been carved by someone. The ghosts were burned to ashes, and everyone present was stunned. This thing had unknowingly swapped out Lu Fengxian, who wasn't weak. Furthermore, it had an extremely strange appearance. Who would have thought that it was so weak that it couldn't even take a single blow from Du Guli? But then everyone realized that whether it was Du Guli or Wei Shuya, their expressions were not relaxed. Because right now, they were still trapped in this space. At this moment, there was a strange laughter, and the ghost appeared out of thin air again. He laughed and said, "Don't waste your energy. In here, I am an immortal existence. You can't kill me, let alone leave. At this point, almost everyone present understood what was going on. That group of ghosts from before was dead. They were merely the resentful projections of the martial practitioners of the sword sect who had been sacrificed in the past. Just as Shen Baochen had said, after 10,000 years, under this natural tactical matrix, these resentments finally formed a ferocious spirit. Therefore, it was also them, a collection of everyone's resentment. However, Du Guli didn't seem to have given up. He continued to attack. The ghost didn't even put up any defense and allowed him to kill it. However, in the end, it always reappeared in the air. It didn't even lose the slightest bit of strength. Everyone's heart sank again when they saw this. What kind of enemy was the most difficult to deal with? Like this thing, you don't even know how to deal with it. That's what's really hard to deal with. At this time, the ghostly being pointed at LV Fengxian and laughed strangely. I'm sure you all know what happened to us. 10% live, 90% die. Lord Sect Master was ruthless in the past, but I also want to see if you can be so ruthless. This young man has LV Wenho's aura in his body. I didn't expect that after 10,000 years, that ancient ferocious demon god still left behind an inheritance or bloodline. Anyway, no matter what, the aura in his body is suitable for me to possess. However, there seems to be something left behind by LV Wenho in his body that's resisting. Therefore, I'll give you a chance now. Help me destroy his primordial spirit. As long as you let me possess him successfully and let me have a body, I will naturally leave this place and let you go. Do you want one person to die or a dozen people to die? It's your choice. The majority or the minority, I believe that you will definitely make a wise choice. The ghost kept laughing strangely, as if he was very happy to see everyone else immersed in such a dilemma. Actually, he was wrong. Apart from Chu Xiu, the rest of the people present didn't have much of a relationship with Lu Fengxian. To them, it was worth sacrificing Lu Fengxian in exchange for them to leave this godforsaken place. Thus, there were many people that were tempted by the offer. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and looked around. He didn't say a word. He had never been afraid to speculate about others with the greatest evil intentions. It didn't matter whether the people present were righteous seniors or famous martial arts figures. It was not difficult for them to sacrifice an insignificant person. Chu Xiu also didn't bother to reason with them. He said that the ghost's words couldn't be trusted, and so on. At this time, it was usually unreasonable. His brain was working quickly, thinking of a way to break out of this situation. Chu Xiu didn't believe that he really couldn't get out of this place. If the strength of this vengeful spirit was really so strong, maybe he would have broken through the seal long ago. Why should he continue to be trapped here? While thinking, Chu Xiu asked, Lu Jianghe, don't just watch the show. Do you have any ideas? Lu Jianghe spread out his hands and said, when I encounter this kind of situation, I usually go on a killing spree. Who asked me to be so strong at that time, second only to the 4 great demon lords? At that time, if anyone dared to touch my dog, I would suck all the blood in his body, dry him, and hang him in front of the mountain gate of his sect, let alone kill his people. Think about how powerful I was back then. Can't you show some respect to me? Why do you always call me by my name? After all, you have learned my blood god demonic technique. It's not too much to call me Lord Demon Lord, right? Chu Xiu didn't care about Lu Jianghe's nagging. When he heard Lu Jianghe's first sentence, his eyes suddenly lit up. When encountering a problem that couldn't be solved, a killing spree was actually the best solution. At that moment, everyone present fell silent. Although they all agreed on using Lu Fengxian's life to get them out of this godforsaken place, no one spoke first. Although most of them thought so, some things were better said than done. At the very least, even if they agreed, they couldn't be the first to say it. Therefore, no one spoke first. However, at that moment, the corners of Duan Tianlang's mouth curled into a sinister smile. Previously, when he was chased by Chu Xiu, it could be said that he was extremely miserable. Burning his blood essence and using a secret technique to escape had not only seriously injured him, but it had also damaged his own source. Even if he recovered his strength in the future, the damage to his source would be impossible to make up for. At the very least, it would cause his strength to plummet. At the very least, it would cause him to be unable to improve for the rest of his life. It might even affect his lifespan. This was something that Duan Tianlang absolutely couldn't tolerate. He hated Chu Xiu to the core. Duan Tianlang knew that Lu Fengxian was Chu Xiu's good friend. Although he couldn't kill Chu Xiu now, he could kill Lu Fengxian first and make Chu Xiu suffer for a while. However, before Duan Tianlang could speak first, Chu Xiu suddenly walked out. Everyone present thought that Chu Xiu would definitely ask for sympathy for Lu Fengxian, but who would have thought that Chu Xiu would point at Sun Qili and Sun Qifan and say coldly, "Evildoers, it's fine that you pretended to be Brother Lu just now. How dare you pretend to be Brother Sun now? Show your true colors." The Sun brothers were stunned when they heard that. Since when were they impersonated? Moreover, we aren't that familiar with you, Chu Xiu. Brother Sun? They have never addressed each other as brothers. In terms of seniority, the Sun brothers were one generation older than Chu Xiu. Not to mention the Sun brothers, even the others couldn't react in time. But at this time, Chu Xiu had already made his move. The heavenly demon dance erupted with monstrous devil chi, slashing directly toward the Sun brothers. The power was like seeing the enemy who killed their father, and they couldn't wait to kill the other party immediately. Everyone present frowned. No one could understand what Chu Xiu was doing. Of course, they didn't believe in impersonation. Previously, the ghost impersonated Lu Fengxian only because he wanted to seize Lu Fengxian's body. Now that he was about to succeed, why would he still pretend to be the Sun brothers? The power of Chu Xiu's saber was incomparably powerful. Even though the Sun brothers had used all their strength to resist, they were already at a disadvantage after a few moves. Previously, the Sun brothers and the other four joined forces to besiege Chu Xiu, but they were still easily defeated by Chu Xiu. Although they each had their own thoughts, so the five of them didn't use all their strength, now the Sun brothers were shocked to find that even if they used all their strength, the result would still be the same. Duan Tianlang tried to persuade Bu Tiannan, Big Dragon Head, this Chu Xiu is clearly trying to divert our attention. Stop him, don't let him kill her. Bu Tiannan sneered, don't waste your energy to provoke me. I know you want to kill Chu Xiu, and I will do it even if you don't say it. You have to look at the master before beating a dog. I warned him before, but he still hurt you like this. Obviously, he doesn't take me, Bu Tiannan, seriously. Duan Tianlang was delighted, but then he suddenly realized that he had to look at the master before beating a dog. Although what he had done all this time seemed to be Bu Tiannan's most flattering lackey, it still hurt his pride to hear Bu Tiannan say it so bluntly. Just as Bu Tiannan moved, Wei Shuya stood up and said, Bu Tiannan, there is no hatred between your Blue Dragon Society and my Yinma clan. Now that you have offended the righteous martial arts world, do you still want to offend my Yinma clan? Bu Tiannan stood with his hands behind his back, but the killing intent around him had condensed to the point that it was almost tangible. He pointed to his face and said, I am a person who cares about face. If someone doesn't give me face, I will kill him. If the Great Guangming Temple dared to destroy my Northern Yen division, I will go to the Great Guangming Temple to ask for an explanation. Chu Xiu touched my people, and under the premise that I warned him, that is a slap to my face. Elder Wei, I will give you face, but the most I can do is to let Chu Xiu die a little better. But if you want to stop me, let alone your Yinma clan, even if Yi Xiaonan comes, the result will be the same. You're tuning in to the Unparalleled Sword Will YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.